Imagine being an orphan struggling with life and then getting kidnapped at the age of 7. You would think, what could be worse? But that was just the beginning. The ones who kidnapped you were mad scientists who experimented on you, implanting minerals from the gate and monster cells inside you, slowly turning you into a chimera hunter. They forced you to fight monsters for 70 years, and when your body started to fall apart, they abandoned you in a dungeon to die. But little did they know, they had also implanted the power of an immortal monster within you. That power revived you and turned you human again. Well, this is the tragic story of our main character, who now stands at a crossroads with two paths ahead, one of revenge and the other of forgetting everything to live a normal life in the dungeon. If you guys think this story is good, then make sure to like and subscribe this channel. Then let's start. One day, a sudden tear appeared in the sky, forming a blazing red cross-shaped rift. Its edges crackled with energy, radiating an ominous glow as if the heavens themselves had been split apart. On that fateful day, everything began to change. From the ominous rift in the sky, a gate tore open, flooding the world with chaos. Swarms of monstrous insect-like creatures poured out, their wings beating furiously as they descended upon the earth. And with their arrival, destruction followed. From beyond the rift emerged a world that would later be known as the Demon Realm. From its depths, ferocious and merciless monsters poured into the human world, their presence bringing chaos and ruin wherever they went. In humanity's darkest hour, certain individuals awakened with extraordinary abilities. These chosen ones, known as hunters, rose to stand against the monstrous threat, wielding powers that defied ordinary limits. These hunters were individuals who had awakened to the power of mana, granting them extraordinary abilities that set them apart from ordinary humans. With the emergence of these empowered individuals, humanity finally found the strength to fight back, launching a counterattack against the monstrous invaders. As the years went by, the scars of war slowly began to fade. Cities rose once more from the rubble, rebuilt under the warm glow of a new dawn. Though countless challenges still lingered, life gradually found its rhythm again. At the very least, some people were able to reclaim and enjoy a semblance of normalcy. Peace was fragile. The threat was never truly gone, as monstrous creatures continued to emerge, forcing humanity to remain vigilant and ready for battle. To combat the relentless waves of monsters pouring into the world, warriors fought fiercely, determined to hold the line and protect humanity from annihilation. With a fierce cry, the warrior swung his weapon, striking at the monstrous abomination before him, its gaping maw lined with jagged fangs and filled with unblinking eyes. Every blow was a desperate attempt to keep the horrors at bay. Despite their bravery, there was a critical problem. The number of hunters who naturally awakened their powers was far too few to match the overwhelming tide of monsters. Thus, in response to this dire shortage, something new was created, a force born out of necessity to stand against the relentless threat. It was none other than artificial life, beings created by human hands, their glowing eyes and formidable presence signaling a new weapon in the fight for survival. This creation was known as the Chimera Hunter, a powerful artificial warrior, forged to annihilate monsters with unmatched precision and devastating force. The experiments utilized grim materials, corpses of death row inmates and animals, serving as the foundation for creating these artificial warriors. They also incorporated rare minerals harvested from deep within the gates, their otherworldly energy serving as a vital component in the creation process. Monster cells were added to the mix, infusing the creations with the power and ferocity of the very beasts they were designed to hunt. In a desperate bid for survival, humanity pushed the limits of science and morality, fusing the remains of beasts and humans within ominous laboratories to forge weapons capable of turning the tide. These advancements made it possible to mass-produce chimera hunters, ensuring a steady army of artificial warriors to confront the monstrous threat. This alliance was hailed as the perfect fusion of the scientific and hunter communities, combining intellect and combat prowess to create humanity's ultimate line of defense. This collaboration significantly reduced hunter mortality rates and saved countless lives, marking a turning point in humanity's battle for survival. Decades later, under the quiet of night, an illegal chimera research lab operated in secrecy. Inside, a weary worker sighed, muttering to himself that he only had one last subject to check before he could finally head home. In the B-18 high-grade chimera storage, two researchers moved cautiously down the dimly lit corridor. One of them stopped, shining his flashlight on a particular cell. Number 17. His arm looks a little rotten, he remarked with concern. One researcher shouted urgently, "Hey, don't go near him." The other, unfazed, replied calmly, "It's fine. His brain is damaged. He won't move without orders. A monstrous creature was chained to the ground, its body twisted and unnatural. Its right arm was grotesquely deformed, oozing with strange growths. One of the researchers shined a light on it and said, "His right arm is completely messed up. Could this be a side effect of the experiment?" One of the researchers scoffed and said, "Why are you so scared of a guy who can't even see properly?" But as he spoke, the creature's golden, slit-pupiled eyes suddenly snapped open. One of the researchers stammered, "Let's just roughly pass it. At this rate, he'll be discarded anyway." The other gave a casual nod and replied, "All right, man." The chained creature sat silently in the dimly lit cell, its piercing eyes locked on the two researchers. Neither spoke, the heavy atmosphere pressing down on them as the sound of chains subtly echoed in the air. Inside the lab director's office, a cold and detached voice declared, "Number 17 is now useless," sealing the creature's fate without a hint of remorse. One of the scientists reported, "His body is too badly damaged. If it were any other one, it would have died already." The lab director, seated behind his desk, responded coldly, "How much longer does it have?" One of the scientists replied, "A month at most." The other nodded in agreement, adding, "I agree." The man smirked slightly and said, "Deploy him in this gate blockade operation. Have him guard the rear when the hunters retreat." Under the dim, cold light, the chained beast lay battered and bloodied. Directors commanded researchers to do not input a return command. Far away, in the scorching skies of the Demon Realm's Rocky Mountain region, the ground cracked beneath a lone figure. Golden streaks of power burst through the air. From the red sky above, a massive golden-scaled beast dove with its jaws wide open, teeth glinting menacingly. Its roar shook the heavens as it descended upon the horned figure below. Number 17 braced himself, his clawed legs digging into the ground as golden energy swirled around him. Blood ran down his back, but his eyes were fierce. The golden beast lunged, but Number 17 swung his massive claw and ripped it apart in midair. Suddenly, the ground around him shattered violently as fiery projectiles rained down. Explosions filled the battlefield with smoke and fire, but Number 17 stood tall, his eyes fixed ahead. From the cracked earth, a monstrous plant-like beast erupted, roaring as venomous vines whipped outward. The ground shook, but the white-haired Number 17 didn't flinch. His massive, clawed limbs crushed the earth as his glowing eyes radiated killing intent. With a burst of power, he launched into the sky, leaving a blazing trail behind him. The plant beast recoiled in fear, but it was too late. Mid-air, Number 17 twisted and struck, his claws slicing the monster apart, chunks of red flesh raining down across the battlefield. Explosions shook the battlefield, debris flying everywhere. Number 17 opened its jaws wide, rows of sharp teeth gleaming as blue lightning sparked around them. In its mouth, a glowing sphere of energy formed, building up for a deadly attack. A flash of blue lightning blasted from its maw, shooting down like a spear of pure destruction. The beam struck its target directly, scorching everything in its way. The creature was swallowed in the blinding light, its body convulsing as it let out a terrible scream. Sparks crackled across its frame until it looked ready to tear apart from the inside. The battlefield lay in ruin, streaks of lightning still crackling in the air as the dust settled. The group stared at the lone figure ahead, their gazes filled with awe. "Amazing," one of them breathed, unable to hide their astonishment. "To annihilate so many monsters with a single attack," another remarked, his voice tinged with respect, as expected of an S-class chimera hunter. The man glanced at the swirling, fiery portal in the distance, his expression tense. "By the way, there's no sign of the gate closing. It's the third day," he said gravely. But then, another guy in a calmer tone told him to don't worry too much, saying, "No matter how many monsters pour out, as long as we have that S-class chimera, we can hold out indefinitely," he declared confidently. But as he spoke, a towering mass of monsters surged upward like a dark tidal wave, racing toward Number 17 standing defiantly at the peak. That man gripped his weapon tightly, the steel gleaming under the ominous crimson sky. "We just have to," he muttered, bracing himself for what was to come. "We just have to," he said, before swinging his blade in a swift, deadly arc. Green blood splattered as the monster was cleaved apart. "Deal with the stragglers that get through." The gate pulsed ominously, its swirling darkness framed by a blazing crimson glow. An unsettling hum filled the air, as if the portal itself was alive and waiting to unleash what lay beyond. A voice rang out urgently. "Red gate disappearance signal confirmed." The tension in the air thickened as the man in the long coat tightened his grip on his weapon. His eyes locked forward. "It's here," he said, his tone calm yet edged with anticipation, as the last remnants of slain monsters littered the ground around them. "All right, retreat! Everyone, exit through the gate!" The order rang out with urgency as boots pounded against the ground, their wearers sprinting toward safety before the portal closed. A clenched fist smashed forward with explosive force, the impact shattering the surface it struck as shockwaves rippled outward. Number 17 continued fighting. A massive red and blue creature attacked fiercely, its claws striking down at number 17 on the ground. Two hunters sprinted away from the scene. One of them, a red-haired woman, called out, "Wait, aren't we taking that number 17? The dark-haired man beside her replied without slowing down, "They said not to retrieve him." The red-haired woman questioned in disbelief, "Isn't that expensive?" Meanwhile, number 17 with piercing yellow eyes struggled under the crushing grip of the massive red and blue claw. "They said its lifespan was over anyway," the man's detached voice replied. As they sprinted toward the gate, the red-haired woman's voice wavered with guilt. "I feel kinda bad. If it weren't for him, the damage would have been immense this time." The dark-haired man shot her a sidelong glance and replied bluntly, "Why worry unnecessarily? You know those guys are practically inorganic." His words were cold, stripping away any sense of individuality. Number 17 was trapped in a crushing grip, blood dripping where the claws dug into its flesh. The enemy's hold was unyielding, as if determined to never let it go. But with one brutal strike, number 17 tore the limb free, spraying white fluid across the air. The blood-soaked figure, hair whipping wildly, stood tall despite the chaos. In the silence that followed, only one truth rang in number 17's mind: they're monsters. The mission was simple: protect the hunter's rear at all costs. The battle raged on. Number 17 tore through enemies, severed limbs flying across the ground. It stood firm, holding the line so others could move forward safely. A monstrous jaw lunged toward it, glowing eyes filled with hunger. But before it could bite down, blue lightning crackled through the darkness. Power surged from number 17, a sphere of energy blazing in its grasp. Its golden eye gleamed fiercely under its horned crown, as it unleashed a colossal blast of blue and white energy. The ground split open, debris flying high as the destructive beam ripped everything in its path apart. Even as smoke and lightning filled the battlefield, a calm voice echoed in its mind. "Do you understand?" Wrapped in a green poisonous mist, number 17 staggered forward, bleeding heavily. Blood dripped from its jagged teeth, its claws still raised, refusing to surrender. Through the haze, the words pulsed in its head: "There is nothing else. When the mission ends, you don't return." The comms crackled with number 17's cold report: "Retreat route secured." Its severed claw fell heavily to the ground, lifeless. The mission was complete. Around it, the battlefield was covered in green monster blood, bodies piled in broken heaps. At the center, number 17 lay battered and dying, while the remains of a severed claw rested beside him. With massive, slime-covered number 17 loomed in the light, its jagged teeth bared as thick green fluid dripped from its body. In his mind, a voice instructed him that return is not permitted. On this day, the final mission report for Chimera Hunter number 17, who met its demise, was recorded as follows: number of hunter deaths, 0. The battlefield was littered with the corpses of countless monsters, their twisted forms sprawled in heaps across the cracked earth. In the foreground, the massive segmented body of a slain creature lay still, green blood pooling beneath it. At the center of the carnage, a lone figure remained motionless, surrounded by the remnants of the brutal fight. The once towering threat had been eradicated, leaving only silence in its wake. Total number of monsters subjugated, 1,823. The staggering count was a testament to the scale of the battle. One hunter against an overwhelming tide of monstrosities, leaving behind nothing but carnage. At the moment of death, in number 17's mind, fragments of an unrecorded past began to surface. It recalled that it had once been a complete human, and that it was kidnapped at the age of 9. Starting from that memory, a panorama of number 17's life began to flash before its eyes. Unfortunately, number 17's damaged brain couldn't fully comprehend the meaning behind those scenes. It calmly watched its past life unfold. 79 years ago, at the District 13 orphanage, a man stood outside holding a baby. Looking down at the child, he read softly, "The child's name is..." 70 years ago, a boy sat silently on a chair, his head lowered. A man stood before him, scolding, "You hit a friend with a stone because they teased you a bit? How many times has this happened now?" The boy remained wordless. Snow fell quietly outside as the doors slammed shut with a loud bang. "We can't keep you anymore." With those words echoing in his mind, the boy stepped out into the falling snow, arms crossed against the cold, leaving the orphanage behind. The boy collapsed face first into the snow, his breath visible in the cold air. a looming shadow stretched over him, hinting at someone, or something, approaching. One of the men scoffed, remarking on how, in the slums, children could be found rolling around in the snow. Another voice followed, cold and transactional, asking, "How much is all this?" Strapped to a cold metal table, the boy lay motionless, his limbs bound by restraints and electrodes fixed to his skin. His mouth was gagged, preventing any cry for help. A gloved hand loomed over him, holding a syringe filled with a mysterious purple liquid. From somewhere in the room, a voice questioned with chilling detachment, "Is it a new experimental subject?" In a dimly lit laboratory, several scientists stood around the restrained boy, discussing his identity with clinical detachment. "What number?" one asked. "It's number 17, another replied without hesitation. A quiet observation followed, laced with grim certainty. Spells must have been cast to ensure there was no chance of escape. One of the masked scientists gave a curt order. "Okay, record it." Another, holding a clipboard, noted in a clinical tone, "Number 17. S plus class silkworm larva cell injection." Number 17's restrained hand twitched violently, the black tattoo stark against his pale skin. One of the observers spoke with clinical anticipation. "Let's watch now. What kind of reaction will appear?" One of the researchers stared at the readings in disbelief. "No side effects." Another observed the restrained boy in the chair and added, "A special ability has appeared, but his human form and ego are maintained." One of the researchers examined the data carefully and remarked, "It seems to have a unique constitution." Another, with a cold and clinical tone, ordered, "Keep implanting various things until there's a reaction." The group of scientists huddled closely together under the harsh white light, their lab coats forming a wall of secrecy. Whatever they were observing seemed to demand their full attention, the air in the dimly lit lab thick with tension. Then 64 years ago, in the midst of a crumbling room, number 17 stood firm, energy radiating in a brilliant blue sphere between his hands. The ground beneath him cracked from the force, while behind him, two figures struggled, one coughing on the floor, and another cowering in fear. In front of him, a beast with golden fur and a spiked crest loomed, the tension between them crackling in the air. A massive, horned insect-like creature with a yellow and black armored body charged forward at full speed. Its jagged jaws were wide open in a feral roar, sharp fangs bared, and its bladed wings cut through the air as it hurtled toward its target with deadly intent. The blurred cityscape behind it made its speed and ferocity even more terrifying. The monstrous hornet lunged forward with blinding speed, but suddenly a brilliant sphere of blue energy comes towards it. The intense light illuminated its snarling jaws and menacing stinger. Moments before the inevitable impact, number 17 extended his gloved hand toward the incoming force, blue energy swirling violently at his command. Sparks of flame danced along his arm, and the ground beneath his feet cracked and splintered from the sheer power radiating outward. The woman, clutching a young girl tightly in her arms, looked up with a relieved smile. Her voice trembled with emotion as she said, "Thank you for saving me." The fear in her eyes was slowly replaced by gratitude, while the child held on to her quietly, still wary of their surroundings. One of the uniformed men, his shoulders heavy with guilt, looked at the number 17 and said, "I'm sorry to put such a burden on a child like you." Number 17, his face calm and voice steady, simply replied, "It's fine." The scene shifted to a pair of sturdy black boots stepping onto the cracked ground, the words, 59 years ago, marking the moment. Number 17 stood in the middle of a ruined battlefield, surrounded by shattered debris, the severed limbs of monstrous creatures, and craters embedded in the ground. His mind felt clouded, his thoughts fragmented. Why am I here? The question echoed in his head as he struggled to recall anything. What was I doing just now? He wondered, staring blankly at the carnage around him, as if a crucial piece of his memory had just slipped away. From behind, a man in a white lab coat with round glasses called out, "Oh, number 17, why did you stop?" There was a faint, almost mocking curiosity in his tone as he added, "Did your memory get confused?" His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the chaotic battlefield around them. The man in the white lab coat threw his arms wide, his face lit with unsettling excitement. "Your side effects have finally begun," he declared, almost gleefully. Standing a short distance away, number 17 stared at him in confusion. His thoughts clouded. "Side effects?" he echoed silently, unsure of what the scientist meant. The man in the lab coat carefully documented his observations, noting, "As a result of implanting over 500 types of monster cells for 15 years, 54 years ago, deep within a secret laboratory, relentless experiments took place. The result was extraordinary, a being with power beyond measure, possessing at least an S-rank hunter classification. his true strength practically incalculable. Now, bound in heavy chains and drenched in blood, Number 17 sat restrained in a chair, his monstrous aura radiating in the dim light. The scientist, unable to hide his manic pride, declared him the lab's greatest success. 20 years ago, a gloved hand held out a piece of raw meat, the gesture deliberate and coaxing. "All right, Number 17, good boy," the voice called out softly, as if speaking to something dangerous that needed careful handling. The young woman flinched back in shock as a large bird-like creature with sharp features and blazing orange eyes lunged toward her. "Whoa!" she exclaimed, instinctively stepping away from the sudden, aggressive movement. The woman crouched a short distance away, smiling in satisfaction. "See? I told you it would eat," she said, watching the creature tear into its meal. This monster was Number 17, nearby. A mother turned away in disgust. "It's gross." A man gently covered his young son's eyes. "Don't look at things like that," he said firmly. 3 days ago, a blinding surge of energy erupted in the air, splitting the sky with crackling light. Number 17's golden eyes widened, reflecting the storm of power as arcs of electricity danced violently around it. Massive, grotesque Number 17 let out a final haunting roar as its body began to dissolve into fragments of light. Its fading voice echoed through the air, repeating in a broken mechanical tone, "All missions complete." As the sun dipped low on the horizon, its golden rays illuminated a vast, jagged chasm that tore through the barren land. The ground was littered with bones and remnants of the fallen, a silent testament to the devastation that had unfolded here. A haunting wind whispered through the canyon, carrying with it the echoes of battles long past. Amid the desolate expanse, a single weathered bone lay half buried in the dust. The bone shifted suddenly, scraping against the dry earth as if stirred by an unseen force. In an instant, with a blinding pillar of light, that bone erupted from the ground, tearing through the darkness and piercing the sky. A massive spinal column, brimming with crackling energy, shot up from the earth, each segment pulsing with unnatural vitality. The narration echoed ominously. This was no ordinary relic. It carried within it the combined power of 527 different types of monster cells, a grotesque fusion of countless creatures' strengths. Its skeletal frame continued to assemble, ribs locking into place around a dark, pulsating core. This abomination was no mere monster, but Chimera Hunter Number 17, a weapon forged from the cells of hundreds of deadly beasts, reborn for one purpose alone. From its spine and ribs, sinewy cords of muscle began weaving into place, twisting and binding together with unnatural speed. The once lifeless bones pulsed with grotesque vitality, each fiber brimming with monstrous power as the creature's body took shape. A blinding explosion erupted, flooding the darkness with searing light. Then bare feet touched down softly on the cracked ground, the air around them still hazy with lingering smoke from the explosion. He looked down at his hands in disbelief, his voice trembling. What is this? The unfamiliar warmth of flesh replacing what he had once been. A haze of confusion filled his mind as he took in his transformed body. Human again now? He asked himself, the words barely more than a whisper. Bathed in the warm glow of the rising sun, he stood at the center of the barren land, his shadow stretching long across the cracked earth. The massive stone arch framed the light behind him, as if the world itself was announcing his return. Revival. The man stood there, looking down at himself in disbelief. His voice trembled as he wondered if he had truly returned to being human again. He looked at his hand, noticing the monstrous claws that had formed. Although he appeared human, he realized that the monster cells within him still remained, meaning he couldn't truly call himself human. Reflecting on the situation, he thought that a lot of time must have passed, and since the lab hadn't come to retrieve him, something unusual was going on. He realized he had been discarded. The experimental number once engraved on his wrist had vanished as well. Looking at his hand, he wondered if this meant he was finally free, no longer bound to the lab or its control. Thinking about the nature of this power, he concluded that such a transformation could only belong to an immortal-type ability. He understood the nature of the ability. It allowed the body to revive up to 3 times, as long as its core remained intact and wasn't destroyed. He recalled how it was believed that human and immortal cells could never fuse. Yet, looking at himself now, he realized that his body had fully recovered, restored to its peak condition. He realized that with all the side effects of the experiment gone, his condition had reached its best state. The constant haze that clouded his mind since the beginning had finally lifted. Even the spells engraved on him to prevent escape or rebellion had completely disappeared. He thought to himself that if his existence as experiment number 17 had truly ended, then perhaps it was finally time for him to live a normal life, as a human. He reflected that number 17 was nothing more than a label forced on him by the lab. His true identity had been buried beneath that number. He remembered someone once telling him that while he might seem rough or even unstable, he should strive to live with purpose, by consciously helping others. He recalled the words spoken to him. If he could live a life helping countless others, that would give him true purpose. And in that moment, his original name came back to him, Cheon Do-woon. He scoffed at the idea, calling it nonsense. To him, the thought of helping others felt meaningless. After all, how could an orphan who grew up in the slums possibly be capable of saving anyone else? It didn't make sense. He stood at the edge of the cliff, staring into the vast horizon as the sun set. With his thoughts heavy, he questioned what path he should take now. The idea of revenge echoed in his mind, tempting him as a possible answer. He realized that revenge wasn't something he could pursue blindly. It required a clear target standing before him, someone to focus that rage upon. He admitted to himself that the events which had once fueled his hatred now felt so distant that his desire for revenge no longer burned as fiercely. Besides, there was no way for him to return to the human world at this moment. He decided that if he lived long enough, he would eventually cross paths with them again. For now, he pushed the thought aside, telling himself he would deal with it when the time came. He narrowed his eyes, his gaze firm and focused as he looked down on his lower body. He stood tall, his back to the setting sun as its light shone through him, casting a powerful silhouette. In silence, he faced the horizon, lost in thought about the uncertain path ahead. At last, he made his choice. For the time being, he decided to set everything else aside and try living, at least a little, like a human. As he took his first steps forward, a simple but important thought crossed his mind. If he was going to live like a human, the first thing he needed was clothes. As he walked across the barren land, he wondered to himself, when was the last time he had even worn clothes? The thought felt distant, almost foreign, after everything he had been through. As he wandered near the shimmering lake, he wondered what material he could possibly use to make clothes. The thought lingered in his mind. Whatever it was, it would need to be tough enough to last. Peeking through the bushes, he considered his next step. Perhaps it was best to look around the area for something useful, anything that could serve as material for clothes. As he searched, something caught his attention. With a curious look, he leaned closer and muttered, This is... He came across the fallen body of a large beast. Observing its state, he wondered if it had died in a territorial dispute. Judging by the lack of major injuries, he concluded that it must have been an exceptionally strong creature. Looking closer at the creature, he realized the truth. It hadn't fallen in battle. Instead, it must have died from poison. He smirked with satisfaction and raised his hand. Good, he muttered, relieved. It was perfect timing, just when he needed leather. Without hesitation, he drew his blade. As sparks of energy flashed, his hand turned into a blade. This was another creature's power he got. Holding the curved blade firmly, he muttered with a faint smile, I guess I'll need a blade to make it easier, right? He recalled the lessons he had learned back at the lab. First, cut the belly straight, then make incisions along the limbs, right? He muttered to himself, visualizing the steps in his mind. With a determined look, he nodded to himself and said, Okay, let's try it. As he pressed the blade down, blood unexpectedly seeped out, making his eyes widen in shock, and the next second, his body was suddenly enveloped in a surge of dark gas that comes out of that bird's body. Eyes narrowing, he muttered in disbelief. This is... The air around him twisted violently as a sinister miasma spread out. His eyes widened in realization. Poisonous aura. The ground darkened, trees withered, and even the fallen beast nearby convulsed under the suffocating energy. Despite the poisonous aura swirling violently around him, his body remained completely unharmed, no damage. Glancing at the faint stench in the air, he muttered calmly, It smells. I'll have to wash it. After finishing his task, he looked at his handiwork with satisfaction. It's done. Not bad for a first try, is it? He remarked proudly. Then, without hesitation, he turned his gaze forward and muttered, Next. He stepped into the clear stream, the cool water rippling around his hand as bubbles rose to the surface with each movement. After cleaning it, he examined the hide in his hand. Puzzled. It looked soft when I saw it, he muttered, tugging at the material. But as he tested its texture, he frowned. Is it because it's monster hide? It's too stiff. It's not like it's a metal plate or something. His eyes widened as an idea suddenly struck him, a spark of realization lighting up his expression. Oh, in times like this, he exclaimed, clearly having thought of a solution. Without hesitation, he slammed his fists down on the monster hide repeatedly, using brute force to soften and shape it. The ground shook with each powerful strike. Panting slightly, he glanced at his work and muttered, "Is this how you tanned?" He wasn't entirely sure of the process, but reasoning aloud, he added, "Well, it must be, right?" He lifted the processed hide in his hands, giving it a gentle shake. A bright smile spread across his face as he thought, "Oh, it's done. It's soft." The once stiff monster hide had transformed into a smooth, pliable material, just as he had hoped. He nodded in satisfaction, holding the tanned hide. "Good," he murmured. "The size should be roughly this, right?" Everything seemed to be coming together just as he had envisioned. Just then, the bird beast which he just skinned, a small fire awaked on it, showing that it's alive. After cutting the hide roughly to size, he held it up with determination. But then, the fiery creature unexpectedly emerged from the ground, glaring at him with a fierce intensity. He didn't notice that, and with a burst of strength, he clenched his fist tightly around the pelt, the force radiating outward as the fabric tore under the pressure, showing his sheer determination. He slipped the hide into place, adjusting it around his body with a firm pull. Looking at the result, he smirked slightly and muttered, "Not bad," clearly satisfied with his handiwork. Standing tall under the clear blue sky, he admired his handiwork. The rough, makeshift garment clung snugly to his frame as he tightened the belt around his waist. With a satisfied smile, he declared, "It fits my body perfectly." As he adjusted his rough new clothing, he noticed a strange sensation in his shoulder. Pulling the fabric aside, his eyes narrowed at the sight of a dark purple mark spreading faintly across his skin. Examining it closely, his expression turned serious as he realized, the poison hasn't fully drained. He let out a thoughtful hum, knowing this was something he couldn't ignore. As he sighed in annoyance, deciding to just wear his makeshift clothes despite the discomfort, a strange sound caught his attention. Startled, he turned toward the source and froze. By the water's edge, the creature he thought was long dead suddenly stirred, flames flickering weakly from its head. With a puzzled look, he muttered, "What? Wasn't it dead?" The creature suddenly gasped and choked, its twin flaming heads twitching as if in distress. Despite its weak state, it seemed to react to his presence, almost as though it could understand him. Observing the strange creature struggling yet still alive, he stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Seeing that it's alive despite having rigor mortis," he muttered, narrowing his eyes. "This one must be an immortal type too." He looked at the struggling creature, its flames flickering weakly. "If it were before, I would have killed it without hesitation, because I was a hunter. But now, as he studied it more closely, he realized, the opponent is already weakened, and not even a threat. There's no need to kill it." He looked at the weakened creature and smiled softly. "You and I are both lucky. Since it's our second life, let's live well." As he turned and walked away, he glanced back one last time. "If fate allows, we'll meet again somewhere," he said calmly. The weakened creature lay in silence, its fiery gaze following him as he disappeared into the distance. Bare footsteps echoed softly against the rocky ground as he slowly emerged from the shadows, each step carrying an eerie weight in the silence. Now that he had managed to take care of his clothes, he walked forward with determination. What he needed next was clear. "I need a house," he thought, already planning his next step for survival. Suddenly the ground beneath him began to crack, faint sparks flickering out as the stones split apart. Something was about to emerge from below. With a deafening screech, a colossal centipede-like monster burst forth, its sharp mandibles snapping and its many legs clawing at the ground. The man stood calmly, hands folded behind his back, staring up at the towering creature without a hint of fear. The monstrous centipede loomed high above, its razor-sharp claws glinting menacingly as it prepared to strike. From below, the man stood firm, gazing up at the towering beast with unwavering calm, his posture unshaken despite the terrifying sight. The young man looked up at the towering creature with calm eyes, tilting his head slightly as he asked, almost casually, "Is it too dark here?" With a single sweeping motion of his arm, the young man unleashed a devastating strike. A sharp arc of force ripped through the air, slicing cleanly across the monstrous centipede's body. Green blood sprayed wildly as the beast screeched in agony, its massive form reeling back under the overwhelming power of his attack. The young man calmly turned his back. With his hands folded neatly behind him, he walked toward the light at the end of the tunnel. His voice was cold and indifferent as he dismissed the fallen creature with just one word: rejected. Then he went to a snowy mountain. A cold wind swept across the mountains, carrying with it a relentless flurry of snow. Their large, white-furred beast with a blue face lay in the snow, its mouth wide open in a cry filled with sharp fangs. Snowflakes fell around it as it struggled. Our MC walked past the fallen snow beasts lying across the ground. Looking at the desolate, frozen land around him, he thought to himself that it would be difficult to find any food in such a place. So this place was also rejected. He then walked through the dense forest, and suddenly he wrinkled his nose in disgust. The foul odor in the air made him frown, and he muttered to himself about how unbearable the smell was. This was also rejected. He then stepped into a dark cave. Noticing the damp walls and the sticky green liquid dripping down from above, the air felt heavy and wet, making him frown in discomfort as he muttered to himself that the place was far too humid. This was also rejected. He left the damp cave behind, only to step into another place where streams of lava glowed brightly. The intense heat pressed against him, and with a weary sigh, he muttered that it was unbearably hot. He also rejected it. Stepping out into the open, he was met with a clear blue sky and warm sunlight pouring down. Standing tall on the edge of a rocky cliff, he looked around in surprise and quietly muttered, "Oh," as the brightness washed over him. Standing atop the cliff, he gazed at the breathtaking sight before him. Lush greenery, cascading waterfalls, and a rainbow shimmering in the sunlight. With a hint of surprise, he admitted to himself that the scenery was quite impressive. He never thought he would one day find the demon realm beautiful. Looking out at the peaceful scenery, he wondered aloud if he should explore further. Without hesitation, he leapt gracefully from the cliffside, ready to look around a bit more. He landed with force, the ground cracking beneath him as dust and debris scattered. The impact shook the earth, showing the sheer strength behind his leap. He stood by the water's edge, gazing down at the clear surface. Beneath the gentle ripples, schools of fish swam freely. Observing the scene, he noted that the water was clean and full of life, with plenty of fish to be found. From beneath the surface, sharp-toothed fish lunged upward with menacing glares, their jaws wide open. Watching them, he thought they looked quite delicious. He imagined that if he caught one and roasted it on the spot, it would feel just like camping. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully, imagining a simple life by the water. With the abundance of fish acting as a natural food source, he pictured himself building a small house, sitting outside by a campfire, and living peacefully in the area. As he walked further, his eyes caught sight of bright yellow flowers blooming under the clear sky. As he continued walking, he noticed the fresh scent carried by the breeze. Standing among the tall trees with sunlight filtering gently through the leaves, he took a deep breath of the fresh air. Surrounded by flowers and greenery, he felt a sense of peace, and simply thought to himself, "Good." With a calm smile, he looked up at the sunlight streaming through the leaves above. Feeling at peace, he softly envisioned the name for his future home, Cheon Do-woon House. As leaves gently rustled down from the trees, a single word seemed to echo through the air: approved. At the same time, in that dungeon beneath the wide blue sky, leaves drifted gently across the open plains. The land stretched far into the distance, with mountains rising faintly on the horizon, as if marking the beginning of a new journey. Suddenly, cracks began to spread across the space. The cracks in the space split wide open, releasing a blinding blue light. In an instant, a swirling vortex appeared, twisting violently as if tearing through space itself, ready to connect this land to another realm. With a thunderous crash, something comes out of the vortex and slammed into the ground, scattering dirt and debris in every direction. From within the smoke and dust, a dark figure emerged. Sparks of red energy crackled around its body, and its heavy steps pressed into the ground. Through the smoke and glowing embers, a robot-like figure appeared, its eyes burning a deep, menacing red. Sparks of energy flickered across its body as it looked around, its mechanical voice echoing with a question. "This is the demon realm." On the other hand, our MC clenched his fist, determination shining in his eyes. He told himself that the first step would be finding a proper site to build his house, setting the foundation for the life he envisioned. With a powerful motion, golden energy burst forth from his hand, arcing through the air. It shot downward like a blazing streak of light, slamming into the forest below with explosive force, marking the spot where he intended to build his home. The golden energy struck the forest floor with blinding force, instantly slicing through the massive trees. MC surveyed the fallen trees and the cleared land with a nod of satisfaction. "This much for the site should be enough," he murmured, acknowledging that the space was now ready to begin the next stage of construction. With a wave of his hand, the logs floated up, bound by glowing strands of energy. He carefully separated the sturdy, well-preserved trees from the rest. MC stood with his arms crossed, gazing at the neatly stacked logs. "This many trees should be enough," he muttered thoughtfully. Then his eyes shifted to the stumps scattered across the clearing, a slight frown crossing his face. "Is the floor too uneven?" he wondered, already considering the next step in preparing the site. MC gripped tightly and pulled with all his strength. In an instant, the ground erupted with a thunderous crack as roots and earth were torn apart. Splinters, soil, and leaves burst into the air, the sheer force of his action flattening the uneven land beneath him. He looked over the vast cleared land, satisfied with the result of his effort. The once uneven ground was now leveled, open to the sky. He pressed his hand firmly against the wooden surface, his thoughts calm and focused. I just moved my hands and feet as my heart guided me, he reflected, allowing instinct to lead the way rather than overthinking. Balancing the massive log on one shoulder, he examined the ground carefully. First, I'll plant pillars at each corner, he muttered. The heavy logs sank into the ground with a solid thud as he planted them firmly in place. What do they call this? Free will? He wondered, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Despite the sweat on his brow, there was a lightness in his heart. Anyway, it's fun. Is it because it's my first time building my own house? He thought, feeling an unfamiliar sense of satisfaction. He moved quickly, almost like a blur, placing one plank after another with steady precision, straightening the base of the structure. Step by step, the house was beginning to take shape. He examined the sticky green substance oozing in his hand, its slimy texture bubbling faintly. Building walls, he muttered. Since there were no nails to use, he had to improvise. With a firm nod, he decided, I'll use snail-type monster mucus instead. He carefully pressed the logs together, using the thick green mucus as adhesive. Once it hardens, he thought, it'll be as solid as rock. A faint smile crossed his face as he added, waterproofing, in a way, as the bright sky, golden rays spilling down as the leaves rustled gently in the breeze. Now, for the finishing touches, he murmured, ready to complete his work. He looked up with a satisfied smile, hands resting on his hips as the sunlight shone down on him. Good, he said confidently. Most monsters won't even dare to approach. MC stood proudly in front of the small wooden hut, its walls reinforced with snail-type monster mucus, and decorated with silkworm larva's cocoon silk. Despite its unusual construction, he smiled with satisfaction. Quite cozy. I like it, he said, clearly pleased with his work. He stood in thought as he examined his work. But it's a bit lacking, he muttered to himself, a slight frown forming. It felt like something was missing, though he couldn't immediately put his finger on what it was. He pondered to himself, what was a normal human house like? His mind drifted back to a memory of a classroom. A teacher stood at the front, pointing to a projection on the screen. See, this is what a regular house looked like before the gate opened, the teacher explained, as the students watched an image of an ordinary home with people and a dog in the yard. He recalled the images from the educational videos he had seen back at the lab. In those recordings, families often gathered happily in their yards, children laughing, parents smiling, and even pets playing around. He glanced into the distance, watching the empty yard. That said, I can't raise human world dogs in the demon realm, he admitted to himself, realizing the harsh reality of his situation. Kneeling down and pressing his hand against the ground, he muttered to himself, plants? Should I make a vegetable garden? But what can I even plant in the demon realm? His eyes widened in realization, and with a sudden spark of inspiration, something had just come to his mind. He suddenly remembered something important. There was a snowy mountain nearby, he thought, eyes lighting up at the idea. Then, with a spark of excitement, he wondered aloud, should I plant mandragora? As snow whirled fiercely around the towering peak, the mountain shrouded in a relentless blizzard. The icy winds howled as if warning anyone who dared to approach. Mandragora's habitat lies in the deepest, mana-dense peaks of snowy mountains. But our MC trudged barefoot through the icy terrain, snowflakes swirling all around him. He muttered to himself with a shiver. Speaking of which, it's really snowing a lot. As expected of a snowy mountain, snow fell heavily around him as he looked up at the gray sky. A distant memory surfaced. It was snowing this heavily the day I was kidnapped to the lab too, he thought, the bitter recollection weighing on him like the icy flakes settling on his hair and shoulders. The memory replayed vividly in his mind. At that moment, back then, it was so cold he actually thought being kidnapped was a relief. Looking back, there are some good points about becoming a chimera, he thought. Unlike before, when the cold could strip away his life, now he felt none of its bite. Hunger and freezing, once constant threats, were no longer concerns. It was a grim sort of comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. The snowfall began to ease, the once blinding flurry now reduced to drifting flakes that swayed gently in the wind. Anyway, judging by the mana I'm feeling, I must be almost there, he thought. He stopped in his tracks, his gaze falling on the small cluster of vibrant green plants pushing through the snow, their leaves glistening despite the cold. Found it, he muttered with relief. Luckily, it wasn't a wasted trip. MC knows that plants in front of him has fragile nature. Mandragora are sunfish-like monsters, highly vulnerable to stress. They can die from even the smallest environmental changes. MC crouched in the snow, carefully examining the plants. If I'm going to relocate them, I guess younger, more adaptable individuals would be better, right? He muttered to himself. With a measured decision, he concluded, just 3 roots would be enough. As he yanked the mandragora from the ground, the realization struck him immediately. They're going to scream. I should have covered my ears. As he pulled the plant from the ground, instead of a scream, the little mandragora let out a soft sound. The small creature wiggled in his hand, its leafy head swaying and its round body covered in bits of soil. He blinked in surprise and thought, huh? What is this? He carefully pulled out another mandragora. The tiny creature blinked and let out a soft sound. He looked at it in surprise and thought, one more. He stared at the tiny creature in his hand and thought in disbelief, this one too. The little mandragora wriggled loudly, surprising him even more. He looked at the little creatures in disbelief and thought, no way. Are they? The tiny mandragoras wriggled in his hands, making soft noises. Watching them closely, he wondered, are they sleep-talking? It was well known that mandragora scream is actually a phenomenon that happens only when humans artificially cultivate them. It was revealed that in the low-mana human world, when mandragoras are placed under extreme stress, if they are forcibly pulled out, they let out a terrifying scream, and die as a result. MC observed that since this was the demon realm, the mandragoras didn't scream when pulled out. However, what puzzled him was their lack of resistance. At this point, they should have been struggling desperately to escape, yet they remained still. He suddenly realized the reason behind the mandragora's unusual behavior. Instead of resisting, they seemed to recognize him as kin. Because mandragora cells had also been implanted in his body, he calmly tucked the small mandragoras away, relieved by how easily they accepted him. With a faint smile, he thought that this worked out well. After all, it was better for them if they felt less stressed. MC began to imagine the possibilities for the future. Once the mandragoras had grown well, he thought, perhaps he could ask them for a few root tendrils to brew tea, or even enjoy their fruits as snacks. The thought made him smile as he pictured it vividly. He suddenly recalled an important fact. If the mandragora fruit was forcibly picked, it would become extremely poisonous. Realizing this, he concluded that he would have to persuade them kindly instead of trying to take it by force. MC stood on the snowy cliffside, his eyes narrowing as he listened carefully. From the distance, faint cries echoed through the mountains. It seems there are hunters nearby, he muttered. Though uncertain of their purpose, he couldn't understand why anyone would risk venturing into such a dangerous snowy mountain. He smirked with a confident glint in his eyes. Turning slightly, he asked aloud, almost playfully, shall I go grab some gatestone quickly? On the other hand, 2 men were fighting something. One of the men clenched his teeth in fury, shouting, damn it, to use us as bait and run off. His companion, gripping his weapon tightly, snapped back with urgency. They're coming again. The tension in their voices revealed just how dire their situation had become. From the darkness of the snowy forest, monstrous creatures lunged down upon the hunters with terrifying speed. The 2 men on the ground braced themselves, weapons raised, but the overwhelming number of beasts was too much. A monstrous snow beast lunged forward, its gaping jaws splitting unnaturally wide. Inside its maw, rows of razor-sharp fangs glistened, but what was even more horrifying were the writhing, fleshy tentacles that extended from its throat. The hunters were now face to face with a nightmare far beyond their imagination. One man thrust his hand forward, summoning a glowing blue barrier that blocked the charging beasts. The creatures slammed into the shield with force, but he gritted his teeth and held on, straining under the impact. Sweat ran down that man's face as he gritted his teeth, his expression filled with strain and fear. His strength was failing, and with a trembling voice he muttered, no good. Cracks began to spread across the barrier, glowing faintly under the pressure. His hands trembled with effort as he realized in fear, the barrier will break soon. The cracks in the glowing barrier spread rapidly as the man's strength faltered. Beads of sweat rolled down his face while regret filled his thoughts. He cursed himself silently. I should have just stuck to odd jobs. Why did I even volunteer to find the chimera? The barrier finally shattered into glowing shards, scattering into the air. The man screamed in pure desperation, his voice cracking, help! As monstrous beasts lunged toward him. Just then a light shined in the sky. It crashed down from the sky, followed by a deafening explosion. The ground erupted, blasting dirt and stone into the air as shockwaves tore through the battlefield. The monsters, feral rabbit-like beasts with bloodthirsty eyes, snarled and growled, surrounding the 2 men trapped in the chaos. One soldier, barely able to stay on his feet, trembled as he raised his gun, while the other sat on the snow, wide-eyed and frozen in terror. His voice cracked as he stammered, what is that? From within the swirling smoke, an ominous silhouette slowly began to emerge. Through the thick smoke, The soldiers squinted their eyes in shock. One of them stammered in disbelief, realizing the dark silhouette was not a beast, but a human figure slowly emerging from the haze. Out of the dust and smoke, and our MC finally appeared. His face was calm and unreadable, his silence carrying more weight than words as he stood there. He narrowed his eyes at the creature before him. It looked like a snow rabbit, but its fierce glare and sharp fangs revealed it was anything but ordinary. But the snow rabbits froze in place, as an ominous presence loomed above the MC. He released his killing instinct, and a massive, shadowy figure with glowing eyes appeared, its terrifying aura filling the air. The snow rabbits screamed in terror, their cries echoing through the frozen forest. Panic spread among them as they leapt and scattered in every direction, desperately trying to escape. The two hunters stared in shock, disbelief written across their faces. One clutched his wounded arm, his voice trembling said, "It's impossible, a B-class monster, running away as soon as it sees him." In the quiet moment that followed, one hunter expressed gratitude, saying how thankful they were for being saved. One of the hunter introduced himself as Kim Tae-hoon, and pointed to his companion, Oh Seong-ju. With a respectful tone, he asked MC for his name. MC calmly replied that he is Cheon-do-woon. Kim Tae-hoon's mind raced as he studied the MC before him. Cheon-do-woon? I've never heard that name before, he thought. The MC's ragged outfit only deepened his suspicion. What's with those clothes? Could he be a reclusive hunter? MC couldn't help but question. Why are they here? From their appearance, they clearly seemed like a D-class hunter. There was no way they didn't know how dangerous the snowy mountain was. One hunter hesitated before replying that this is because of money. They told MC that a request had been issued to capture a chimera alive. The reward offered was said to be substantial. Hearing this, MC's eyes sharpened as he muttered softly to himself. A chimera, one of the hunter explained with a laugh that a test subject had escaped from the lab. It was said to be some kind of machine creature, and while fleeing, it supposedly jumped into a gate. Hearing this, MC thought to himself with relief, if it's a machine creature, then they're not looking for me. MC made up his mind, thinking to himself, I should grab the gate stone and go. MC then questioned suspiciously, but where are your bags? You didn't come to the demon realm empty-handed, did you? The gate stone, one of the hunter quickly made up an excuse, stammering. Those team members, those guys took everything and ran off. Clutching his wounded shoulder, the man gritted his teeth and shouted, they intended that from the start. Inwardly, he regretted not realizing it sooner, thinking, I should have noticed when that B-class hunter offered to let me join. Those traitorous hunters laughed and fled, leaving monsters in their wake. Hearing that MC thought to himself, then the gate stone is with them. The nervous hunters, their bodies trembling from exhaustion, pleaded with MC. Don't you have any plans to return? We're almost at our limit, you see, one stammered desperately. The other added, you know well what happens when you're contaminated by mana, don't you? They looked at him with a mix of fear and urgency, hoping for mercy. Well, the time a hunter could endure in Demon Realm varied greatly depending on their awakening grade. If they failed to return to the human world in time to purify the mana within them, most would inevitably die. But there was one anomaly. Our MC was the exception. Both of the hunters' desperate voices echoed. One asks that, can't he please take them to the human world, adding that his pregnant wife is at home. But MC wasn't listening to them, and was using his powers to search the other hunters. Found them, he muttered, locking onto his targets with unwavering focus. The desperate plea of the hunters was suddenly cut short. With a thunderous burst, MC shot forward with terrifying speed, the force leaving a deep crater behind. The two hunters froze, wide-eyed, as Cheon-do-woon suddenly leapt into the sky with incredible speed. The hunters panicked and shouted after him. Mr. Cheon-do-woon! One of them cried out in shock. Where are you going? The other yelled, their voices filled with confusion and desperation. On the other hand, the little robot was running away, its glowing eyes fixed on the bright streak. It didn't say a word, only a quiet pause, as if processing everything it had just witnessed. The little robot reached at the edge of the snowy cliff, its small footprints trailing behind it. From above, it gazed down at the dark, thorn-filled forest below. Snow fell gently, but the eerie sight of the twisting shadows made it cautious. The robot quietly noted to itself that this place seemed very dangerous. From behind, a group of hunters spotted the small robot standing ahead on the snowy cliff. Seizing the moment, one of them shouted that this was their chance, and urged everyone to capture it quickly. Without hesitation, they all charged forward, shields and weapons ready. The small robot turned its head slightly, its glowing eyes steady as faint sparks lit up around its frame. In a calm yet ominous tone, it muttered, dangerous things. The robot's transformation was sudden. Its once warm yellow eyes now burned with a sinister red glow. Crimson sparks and violent energy crackled around its body as its form shifted into a darker, more menacing version of itself. The robot system activated, its cold voice echoing just one command. Its only purpose now was clear: to eliminate everything in its path. 4 warriors attacked the robot together. One leapt from above with a shield in hand. Another swung down with a glowing purple sword. A woman surrounded by a magical aura rushed forward, while a man with a heavy blade slashed fiercely from the ground. The robot, its body shining with red energy, raised its arm to defend against their combined assault as the battle exploded around them. Sometimes later, our MC arrived at that place. He looked ahead with surprise. In a worried voice, he wondered if he had arrived just a little too late. He walked across the blood-stained snow, noticing the abandoned gear scattered around. From the scene and a return stone floating in air, he realized that all the hunters had already run away. The hunters had even left behind their luggage in their rush to escape. On the ground, mixed among the bloodstains, were both small childlike footprints and the tracks of animals. Seeing that, MC wondered if the creature had been fighting those hunters while changing its form. He remembered those hunters telling him that an experimental subject had escaped from the lab. It was a mechanical creature, and during its escape, it transformed and jumped into a gate before vanishing. The creature was created from liquid metal, allowing it to freely change its shape. However, since the material was rare, it was made small, about the size of a child or a large dog. MC thought about the mechanical creature. The fact that it managed to overpower 5 B-rank hunters all on its own was truly impressive. On the other hand, Kim Yao urgently called out, telling Xiongju to snap out of it. Xiongju, weak and trembling, said he is done for, explaining that his whole body was contaminated with demonic energy. Kim Yao refused to accept it, shouting at him not to talk nonsense, and reminding him that his child was going to be born next month. With blood dripping from his mouth, Xiongju weakly begged Kim Yao to tell his wife that he was sorry. Tears streamed down his Kim Yao's face as he cried out desperately, pleading with Xiongju to hold on just a little longer. As despair filled the air, Kim Yao questioned if miracles truly existed. At that moment, a glowing figure stepped forward, their foot touching the ground like a sign of hope breaking through the darkness. Tears still streaming down Kim Yao's face, his eyes widened in shock as a sudden radiant light appeared before him. As the golden light cleared, the Kim Yao's eyes widened in disbelief. Standing before them was Cheon Do-woon, carrying a huge pack on his back. They were stunned to see that the pack he carried was their missing luggage. Immediately, Kim Yao rushed forward, going towards Cheon Do. He dropped to his knees in desperation, his voice trembling as he pleaded. He begged Cheon Do-woon to save them, his cries echoing through the snowy forest. Cheon Do-woon stood there surprised to see him. Kim Yao said he knew that in the lawless demon realm, once it's taken, it's over. So he fell to his knees, and takes out money with trembling hands, explaining that he and Seong-su had brought 2 checks worth 10 million won each, calling it the value of their lives. With desperation in his voice, he pleaded, begging to buy just 1 gate stone. Kim Yao's words echoed. He told MC that if they didn't return now, death was certain. Cheon Do-woon's eyes shifted to the checks trembling in the man's hands. 20 million won? He muttered, his expression unreadable. Cheon Do-woon thought to himself that he couldn't use the money right now, but it would definitely be useful once he went to the human world later. So Cheon Do-woon takes out a gate stone and broke it, releasing its energy. Kim Yao bowed deeply, holding on to Cheon Do-woon's hand with gratitude as the glowing return portal swirled behind them. With a trembling voice, he said that he would never forget this favor for the rest of his life. As chaos unfolded around him, Cheon Do-woon quietly looked at the stack of money in his hand, his face calm and unreadable, while Kim Yao turned to Xiongju, asking him to get up quickly, saying if they go fast, they might live. But before they leave, Cheon Do-woon asked them if a gate stone cost around 200,000 won in the human world. Kim Yao, supporting injured Xiongju, looked puzzled, and replied that gate stones now cost about 1 million won, and questioned why Cheon Do-woon was asking. Hearing that, Cheon Do-woon extended his hand towards Xiongju, and grabbed his shoulder, saying, "It just feels like he received too much." Cheon Do-woon smiled as faint blue energy started swirling around his fingers. With a calm tone, he told them that he would give them something else as change instead. Just as he said that, a surge of bright blue energy erupted around Cheon Do-woon, swirling like flames and shaking the air. Both of the hunters stared at him in shock. Blue flames of mana swirled violently in the air as Cheon Do-woon released his power. Kim Yao realized that Cheon Do-woon is injecting mana, covering his face from the overwhelming energy. He shouted, asking him Cheon Do-woon to wait, because he knows that injecting mana was an act so dangerous that even A-rank hunters avoided it. If the flow of mana clashed and became tangled, the mana core could shatter, causing both individuals to die instantly. The danger was clear. Kim Yao knows that if this continued any longer, both of them would undoubtedly perish. But as the mana flow stopped, Xiongju looked down at his hands in shock. A warm glow surrounded him as he realized what had happened. The demonic energy within him had been completely purified. In excitement, he hugged Kim Yao, whose eyes wide with shock and relief. Xiongju cried out with joy, shouting that they were alive. Both of them had survived. But deep down, Kim Yao still struggled to believe it, whispering to himself that such a thing should have been impossible. As Cheon Do-woon turned to leave, Xiongju behind him dropped to his knees in gratitude. He thanked him with teary eyes, swearing never to forget the favor. While Kim Yao could hardly believe what had just happened, Cheon Do-woon had purified demonic energy by injecting mana, something thought to be impossible without an overwhelming amount of power. After witnessing the impossible, a single thought echoed in their minds: just who exactly is Mr. Cheon Do-woon? On the other hand, Cheon Do-woon walked steadily with a large pack strapped to his back. His expression was calm as he let out a thoughtful hum, lost in his own thoughts. Cheon Do-woon arrived at his small wooden home, relieved to see that no intruders had disturbed it. He looked at it fondly. He thought it had been a satisfying outing, especially since he had gained some unexpected income. Cheon Do-woon glanced at the small mandragora tied to his waist who had waken up. Seeing its drooping leaves, he wondered if the long journey had worn it out. Cheon Do-woon knelt down in front of his small home, carefully planting those mandragora into the soil. As he worked, he thought to himself that this much should be enough. But as the small mandragora swayed in the soil, their faces gloomy. They let out low, unhappy sounds, clearly showing their dissatisfaction. MC noticed the little mandragora unhappy expression and frowned. He wondered aloud what they didn't like. Maybe they are upset because their home had been moved by force. Then, thinking further, he guessed they might be hungry from being carried around without soil. Cheon Do-woon reached out his hand, letting a soft blue glow of mana flow from his fingertips into the soil, asking little mandragora, shall he give them some mana because they usually enjoyed it. The little mandragora began to glow with joy, happily responding to the mana they had received. Watching this, Cheon Do-woon remarked that they seemed more at ease now. But Cheon Do-woon suddenly sensed something unusual. Narrowing his eyes, he thought to himself, this presence, it feels familiar. Cheon Do-woon realized that it's the robot the hunters have been chasing. It was a small mechanical creature, clutching branches as if to camouflage itself. Confused, MC wondered, what business does a machine like that have with me? Cheon Do-woon decided not to overthink it. Calmly, he thought to himself that, well, if it really has business with him, it'll show itself sooner or later. Cheon Do-woon glanced at the stack of money and thought to himself that there was no rush. He would keep it aside for now and only use it when he truly needed it later. Then he sat inside the wooden cabin and unpacked those hunters' backpack. Inside was cooking pots and many supplies. He looked down at them and thought to himself that it was time to organize the luggage he had brought. Cheon Do-woon began checking through his belongings one by one. He had a portable burner and a cooking pot set, perfect for outdoor cooking while hiking, camping, or fishing. There were also 8 gate stones, items that allowed free travel between the human world and the demon realm. He pulled out some spare clothes, though they were contaminated with pollen and needed washing before use. Lastly, he had 2 sleeping bags and a blanket, essential for staying warm at night. Seeing all of this, he thought to himself that those hunters had come very well prepared, which was definitely a good thing for MC. Cheon Do-woon picked up a red packet and realized it was ramen. A wave of nostalgia hit him, as he wondered if the last time he had eaten it was back when he was a child living in the orphanage. Cheon Do-woon smiled as he held the ramen packet in his hands. Feeling the hunger in his stomach, he thought it was the perfect time. With a spark of anticipation, he decided to try cooking ramen. Cheon Do-woon read the ramen recipe, which instructed him to fill 500 milliliters of water. Standing by the river with a pot in his hands, he wondered if he should just estimate the amount by weight. As Cheon Do-woon stood by the river with his pot, ready to collect water, a sudden splash broke the surface. Fierce-looking fish with sharp fins leapt out toward him. Cheon Do-woon, who held the pot of water, remembered that people usually add extra ingredients when cooking ramen. He thought that ramen would taste delicious with fish, and so strike with finger, killing the fish instantly. The recipe suggested adding ingredients like eggs or green onions for better taste. Cheon Do-woon noticed some roe and thought it should be fine to use as a replacement for eggs. Since there were no green onions around, Cheon Do-woon decided to use some other greens he found, thinking it would work just as well. Cheon Do-woon finished gathering all the ingredients, placing them into the pot. With everything ready, he decided it was time to head back. As Cheon Do-woon walked back with the pot in hand, a metallic foot appeared behind him. It was the little robot which stared in awe, its glowing eyes wide and leaves rustling faintly on its head. Holding its stomach as if overwhelmed, it muttered in disbelief, "That man is cooking." Cheon Do-woon lit the fire under the pot, carefully watching the flames rise. As he glanced at the instructions, he frowned slightly, realizing they didn't mention when the fish should be added. Cheon Do-woon stood by the wooden table he had just crafted from a log moments ago. Looking at the pot, he shrugged and decided, "I guess I'll just boil it all together," as he tossed the ingredients in to cook. But as the smell of his cooking loomed over nearby mandragora, their tiny bodies trembling, they twitched uncomfortably, smelling the strange scent. The strange scent drifted through the air, winding its way past the trees as the sunlight filtered through the leaves. The little robot caught the drifting aroma, its sensors twitching as drool leaked from its mouth. "Cooking smell," it murmured, clearly drawn toward the source. "I want to eat it too." "How?" it muttered, its steps following the trail despite knowing it wasn't built for such desires. Its memory stirred, tying the present scent to something once glimpsed long ago. Its body transformed because it saw it in the lab that humans like dogs and humans help if they felt pity. So it transformed into a pitiful-looking dog, whose one leg is injured. Robot let out a soft whine as it approached. Cheon Do-woon, sitting at the table, glanced over with a puzzled expression. He remembered that this mechanical creature has been following him ever since. As he looked at the robot, he wondered if the robot transformed into a dog just to lower his guard, and is it pretending to be hurt on purpose, trying to stir up sympathy? From its actions alone, the MC could tell it seemed like a young creature, one that didn't yet understand much. The little dog barked happily, wagging its tail with innocent excitement. Seeing that MC frowned in thought. How on earth did a creature like this escape from the lab, and make its way all the way to the demon realm? MC looked at the food and said it seemed ready. He asked the little dog if it wanted some too. The dog barked happily in response. Cheon Do-woon picked up his chopsticks and looked at the food, while the little dog stared eagerly at the bowl, drooling with sparkling eyes. Cheon Do-woon looked down at the strange, bubbling dish filled with odd ingredients, and wondered to himself if he should try eating it. He sat at the table, eating from the pot with his chopsticks, while the little dog happily munched on its own share from a plate beside him. As he tasted the food, his eyes widened in surprise, the flavor overwhelming him. Beside him, the little dog tilted its head in confusion, still chewing, while the Cheon Do-woon's thoughts echoed. This taste is... A memory of the past surfaced in his mind. He recalled sitting on the floor with his friends, all gathered around a steaming pot of ramen. Their faces were full of joy as they laughed and chatted. Cheon Do-woon slurped the hot noodles, sweat running down his face. His cheeks flushed, and steam rose around him as he struggled with the heat, but his expression showed pure enjoyment. Cheon Do-woon smiled softly as he tasted the noodles, thinking to himself that this was how it used to taste. In that moment, he remembered the ramen he had eaten when he was just 7 years old. While the sun set behind the mountains, shadows stretched across the forest. From within the trees, Cheon Do-woon's faint voice echoed just one word: delicious. Afterward, Cheon Do-woon stood with his hands on his hips, looking at the dog. He told it that if it was done eating, it could leave since he needed to clean up. The dog then turned and began walking away, while limping on its one foot. Seeing that Cheon Do-woon pointed out that the dog had been limping on its left foot earlier. The dog froze in shock, realizing it had been caught. With a sheepish look, it quickly changed the lead it was limping and walked away, while Cheon Do-woon watched with a knowing smile. Then Cheon Do went to a waterfall. After finishing the dishwashing, he wondered if he should start the laundry next. As he scrubbed clothes by the water, he thought about how he didn't have good memories when it came to pollen. Still, he knew he couldn't keep living in only leather clothes forever. With a small sigh, he reminded himself that he wasn't a caveman. He thought carefully to himself that if he hit the clothes too hard with the stick, they might tear. So, he decided to strike gently while washing them. But despite his earlier thought of being gentle, he ended up striking the clothes with little too much force. The ground cracked, rocks flew, and the impact shook the riverbank, leaving him shocked at what just happened. The stick slammed into the ground with overwhelming force, leaving cracks and debris scattered everywhere. He stared silently at the destruction, speechless at his own strength. He cleared his throat and tried to stay calm. Though one cloth had destroyed, he reassured himself that it was fine, because there was still one more left. But he narrowed his eyes and looked in his side in confusion. This time, That little robot had changed its form into a rock. He wondered to himself why that little robot kept following him around. He remembered that, while he was eating ramen and washing the dishes afterward, the strange little robot appeared again, floating nearby as if it was watching him. Even when he stopped to admire the flowers that looked like forsythia, the little robot appeared once again. It changed its form and came closer, but it never really did anything special, just followed quietly. The little robot, disguised as a log, suddenly froze in surprise when a bee flew close to its face, making it flinch with wide eyes. It panicked as a bee buzzed near it. Terrified, it shouted, "Bee!" and ran away as fast as it could, clearly frightened by the tiny insect. The little robot screamed that it hated bees. Watching its reaction, it seemed like its mental age was no more than that of a child under 5 years old. The little robot spoke in a mechanical and clumsy manner, its words stiff and unnatural, making it clear that it wasn't fully developed in how it communicated. Cheon-du realized that the young chimera had been forced to have knowledge injected into it. Because of this, it showed clumsy behavior and odd reactions, which were common side effects in young chimeras. Cheon-du looked at the flowers and commented, though a bit awkwardly, that the forsythia flowers were pretty. He acted as if he didn't see the little robot. Little robot peeked from behind the flowers, watching shyly. Then something later Cheon-du let out a sigh, realizing that doing laundry was harder than he expected. Still, he held up the clean, shining shirt with a small sense of accomplishment. He looked at the freshly washed shirt in his hands, and felt relieved. At least he had managed to save this one. He noticed the shirt looked a bit too small for him to wear. Since he had washed it so carefully, it felt like a waste. Deciding not to throw it away, he hung it to the side. Then, he thought to himself that it was time to go check on the mandragoras. While he goes to check on them, the little robot, disguised as a rock, stayed silent, only its glowing eyes showing any sign of life. The little robot grabbed the wet shirt, thinking that since the man wore clothes, it should too. The little robot put on the wet shirt and said proudly that it also wore clothes, trying to imitate the man. The little robot happily declaring that it now belonged to him. He stood proudly, glowing with excitement. Golden light surrounded the creature as its form began to change. Shiny, wavy brown hair appeared, glowing beautifully in the transformation. The golden light continued to glow as the transformation went on. From within the shining clothes, a human hand appeared, clenched tightly into a fist. The transformation was complete. The small robot now stood in a full human form, with long brown hair flowing behind and fists resting proudly on its hips. It felt perfect, as if this form was its true self. On the other hand, Cheon-du looked at the little mandragoras in concern. They kept acting weak, their leaves drooping as if they were wilting. Their roots also looked dry, making him wonder why they kept ending up like this. He found it strange, as he was sure he had pulled out all the weeds when preparing the field. While working, he suddenly noticed something unusual and muttered, "What's this?" As he tilled the soil, all sorts of things started coming out of the ground. He realized he should have been gentler while working through it. Shocked, he thought about how he had almost hurt the little mandragoras by mistake. He thought about making a proper vegetable garden in that spot. Estimating the size, he wondered if an area as big as his house would be enough. Just then, he noticed something appear behind him. He looked back and saw a young girl with long, flowing hair peeked out shyly from behind a tree. Her bright golden eyes widened with curiosity as she softly greeted, "Hello." Cheon-du looked surprised, immediately recognizing that it's the little robot. He thought to himself, "This time it's a girl. Is she finally talking to me?" Gathering himself, he responded softly, "Yes, hello there." The little girl looked at the wooden house with hesitation and asked softly if it belonged to him. Cheon-du simply replied with a calm, "Yes." The little girl nervously asked if he was a native of the area. Hearing her question, Cheon-du smirked slightly and thought to himself whether he should tease her a little. Cheon-du said yes and asked her which tribe she belonged to. Surprised and nervous, the little girl stammered, repeating the word tribe in confusion. The girl nervously pointed far away, claiming she came from across the waterfall, a very distant place that he wouldn't be able to find. Cheon-du thought for a moment and asked if she was from the coconut tribe, since they lived near the waterfall. The girl quickly nodded, flustered but determined, and insisted that he was correct. She claimed that she came from the coconut tribe. Cheon-du noticed the outfit and pointed out that it looked like his. The girl quickly explained, flustered, that in her tribe, whoever picks something up owns it, so the clothes were hers now. Cheon-du, amused, simply agreed and told her she could keep it. The girl let out a happy squeal. Cheon-du asked the girl what brought someone from the coconut tribe to this place. The girl, looking nervous, admitted that she had been kicked out of her tribe. Then, gathering her courage, she said she had a request for him. The girl shouted nervously, her face red with determination. I want to live here too. Please. I hope you'll let me stay. She bowed her head deeply, showing her desperation as Cheon-du looked at her in surprise. The girl's eyes widened nervously and she stammered, "Here there are no bugs." Her face showed a mix of worry and desperation as she tried to explain her reason. The girl nervously fiddled with her hands and said softly, "And there's a house too, so it seems safe." She spoke timidly, trying to justify why she wanted to stay. The girl explained shyly, "That's why I want to live here." Hearing this, Cheon-du closed his eyes with a calm expression and thought to himself, so she just needed a place to rest after all. He agreed and said, "All right, but if you want to stay here, you must do your share of work." The girl's face lit up with excitement as she clenched her fists happily. "Understood. Just tell me what to do," she replied eagerly. Cheon-du explained, "First, I need to till the vegetable patch. Can you help with that? I need to make a new home for the mandragoras." The girl eagerly grabbed the tool and declared with confidence that she would handle it, proudly saying she was strong. The girl shouted with determination that she was confident in her strength. With incredible power, she charged forward, tearing up the ground and sending dirt and rocks flying everywhere. Cheon-du watched her run with overwhelming strength, realizing she had no intention of hiding who she really was. He thought to himself that maybe it was because she had only ever lived in a lab, and so she didn't understand how a normal child was supposed to act. Cheon-do introduced himself and asked the girl for her name. She froze for a moment, startled, and nervously repeated the word, "name," as if unsure how to respond. The girl thought to herself that she didn't have a name. She decided she would make a new one, choosing it based on the pretty flower she had once seen. The girl raised her hand proudly and announced with a bright smile, "My name is Kim Nari." Cheon-do tilted his head and asked, "Forsythia?" The girl stomped her foot angrily and shouted, "It's Kim Nari." Then few minutes later little Nari proudly announced that the work was all done. Cheon-do observed and commented that it was finished quickly. A stone fence, carefully made by Cheon-do, surrounded the tilled patch of land. Then he planted the mandragoras there. Little mandragoras jumped around happily with bright smiles, clearly excited and full of energy in their new home. Cheon-do watched them and thought he should have tilled the field more carefully. Meanwhile, Kim Nari stayed quiet, simply observing. Cheon-do suddenly turned his head, sensing something unusual. His expression sharpened as he clearly noticing something that caught his attention. Little Nari suddenly burst into tears, her eyes filled with sorrow. Cheon-do looked at her in surprise and asked why she was crying. Sniffling, she admitted that seeing the mandragoras reminded her of her lost friends, and the memory overwhelmed her with emotion. Cheon-do looked at her with surprise, thinking to himself, "Friends? There's no way she could have had something like that in the lab." He couldn't believe her words, feeling puzzled by what she meant. Just then, little Mari's eyes widened in shock as a loud, terrifying noise echoed around her. A tear rolled down her cheek, and she gasped in fear. Dark shadows spread across the sky, surrounding the area where the small house and vegetable patch stood. Cheon-do calmly told little Nari not to be too surprised, explaining that the frightening noise was just monsters hunting each other, a common sound in this place. Little Nari, trembling and crouched on the ground, nervously admitted that before coming here, she had seen a monster that looked like a chick, and it seemed like several monsters were attacking it. Hearing that, Cheon-do widened his senses and calmly confirmed, "It seems so." Little Nari trembled as she listened, her voice filled with worry. She said it sounded like the creature was in pain and must be hurting. She added that it seemed to have been bitten. Cheon-do, standing calmly beside her, explained without emotion that the creature would soon be eaten, for this was the demon realm after all. He asked her perhaps she saved that monster. Hearing that, little Nari clutched her head. Trembling, she shook her head and cried out in despair, insisting that she couldn't save monsters. Seeing her reaction, Cheon-do wondered if the side effects of the brainwashing command were still affecting her. It seemed she couldn't move according to her own will. Cheon-do thought to himself that he needed to be careful with his words so they wouldn't sound like commands. Smiling gently, he said to the little Nari, "If you help, the monster might survive. Do you want to go and take a look?" Hearing this, the little Mari's eyes widened in surprise, clearly moved by his words. She shouted, "I'll be back," as she launched herself high into the sky, leaving Cheon-do watching her soar upward with determination. On the other hand, huge insect-like monsters with sharp wings and fierce eyes rushed forward aggressively, their movements fast and threatening as they filled the battlefield with danger. Their target, a small, fluffy creature, lay on the ground, weak and injured, its body trembling in fear. One of the giant insect monsters struck at it with a sharp claw, aiming to finish it off as the helpless creature cried out softly in pain. Just then, little Nari rushed in, shouting, Don't torment it! She struck the giant insect monster with all her strength, knocking it back. The small, fluffy creature on the ground looked up in shock as she defended it bravely. Little Nari clenched her fist tightly, determination shining in her teary eyes. With a firm resolve, she thought to herself, I will save it. A memory of past flashed in front of her eyes. In a dimly lit hallway, two children whispered nervously. Pointing at little Robot 1 asked if she had taken first place again in the rank battle. The other, sweating with worry, muttered that if this continued, they would be used for dangerous experiments with high chances of failure. This made those children angry, and they took little Robot's small, yellow toy and torn it. They throws it on the ground, with tufts of its fluffy feathers scattered around. The other children shouted angrily, Let us live too, if only you weren't here. They ganged up, kicking and beating the small robot. Curled up on the floor, the robot thought sadly, Why, I just did as I was told. The small robot trembled. In its mind, it cried out, It hurts. Please stop. Little Nari could not save her toy there, so this time she have divided to save this little white creature. Little Nari shouted with all her strength. Stop! Her cry echoed as the ground shook. Green liquid splattered, and energy burst outward. The force of her will pushed against the chaos, demanding everything to come to a halt. She clenched her fist tightly, her eyes burning with anger and pain. She shouted that many people tormenting just one person was wrong. Her voice filled with the weight of her emotions as energy flared around her. Little Nari shouted with all her strength, declaring that ganging up on one person was a bad thing. With fierce determination she charged forward, her energy bursting out wildly as she struck against the attackers. On the other hand, Cheon-du knelt on the ground, gently touching the small mandragoras on the soil, giving them energy. Looking at them closely, he asked softly, Is it delicious? Just then, little Nari shouted loudly, calling out, Mister! Cheon-du, startled, quickly turned his head to ask her, but it froze mid-word. Little Nari's eyes filled with tears as she clutched the small creature in her arms. Panicking, she cried out. Little Nari held the small, injured creature tightly in her arms. Its eyes were swirling as if it had lost consciousness, and faint marks and bruises covered its body. Cheon-du tried to calm himself down, but then froze in shock. That tiny creature reminded him of the white monster with fiery eyes and a burning presence that he skinned before. He stared at the creature, a strange feeling creeping over him. It seemed familiar. Little Nari clutched the small creature in her arms, her face filled with tears and panic. She looked up desperately and cried out, calling Chen-du uncle, asking what they should do. With trembling words, she explained that the creature wouldn't wake up, her fear and helplessness clear in her voice. She cried out that it didn't look good, and asked fearfully if it was dying. Cheon-du walked toward her calmly, and told her that they should take a closer look. He slowly reached out his hand, blue energy swirling gently around his fingers as he prepared to use his power. He placed his glowing hand gently on the creature, blue energy flowing around his fingers. After checking, he sighed in relief and thought that, fortunately, the wound didn't seem to be fatal. He realized that every monster's magic carried a unique history within it, something that made each one different from the other. He noticed that the creature had shrunk in size, and its color had become lighter, but he was certain it was still the same immortal-type monster from before, now weak and barely conscious in the girl's hands. Cheon-du wondered why the creature had shrunk so much, and if its way of healing was different from his own. Meanwhile, the little Nari, holding the small creature in her arms, anxiously asked if it was truly dying. Cheon-du explained that the creature wasn't dying, but simply malnourished. He noted that it had shrunk because it hadn't been able to get enough food. Little Nari repeated the word, malnourished, in surprise, trying to understand. Cheon-du explained that he had given the creature some mana, so if they left it alone, it would recover on its own. Hearing that little Nari looked down at the creature quietly, her face filled with concern. She remembered her past where two children were very angry at her, and they destroyed her small, worn-out stuffed toy. Looking at that small creature, she remembered that She held up the small, weak creature with worry in her eyes. She pleaded that if they left it alone, it would surely die. Pointing out its condition, she compared it to a rice cake, limp and lifeless in her hands. Little Nari clutched the small creature tightly to her chest, her eyes filled with determination. She asked if she could raise it, saying she wanted to take care of it. Nervously, she promised that she would train it properly, and feed it well too. Her voice trembled as she asked if that would be okay. Cheon-du with a calm smile, and remarked that the creature might grow quite large in the future. Little Nari quickly insisted that she would only feed the creature a little. Cheon-du then allowed her to do as she wished. Hearing this, little Nari's eyes lit up with joy, and she asked in disbelief if he really meant it. Cheondu said yes, and suggested that she could let the creature roam around the yard and even guard the house. While they were talking suddenly, the small creature slowly opened its eyes, looking weak and confused. In a dazed voice, it wondered to itself, "Where am I?" And the next little creature suddenly jolted in shock as it noticed Cheondu standing in front. The small creature's eyes widened in alarm as it recognized the him. With a trembling voice, it thought to itself, "It's the one who took my skin." Back then, hearing the creature's voice, little Nari looked down. Her eyes lit up with excitement as she hugged the small creature tightly. Meanwhile, the creature's face twisted in fear and shock, sweat dripping down as it realized the danger it was in. Little Nari lifted the round creature high into the air with excitement, shouting that it was awake and even making dove-like noises. Meanwhile, the creature, sweating nervously, was shocked and confused. Wondering why a girl was in the demon world, little Nari hugged the little creature tightly with hearts in her eyes, happily shouting that it was finally alive. The creature, however, struggled and begged to be let go. Cheondu, watching this scene unfold, looked confused. The small creature screamed angrily, demanding to be let go. Hearing that, Cheondu's eyes widened in surprise as he realized he could actually understand what the creature was saying. Then something later, little Nari proudly announced that the small creature's treatment was complete. The round creature, now wrapped tightly in bandages, groaned in frustration, saying it couldn't move at all. With excitement sparkling in her eyes, little Nari looked at her uncle and told him she had already picked out a name for it. The little creature angrily shouted to be let out. Ignoring its protests, little Nari happily suggested naming it Coo, since it made cooing sounds like a pigeon. Cheondu, carrying heavy logs on his shoulder, looked over and simply said that the name wasn't bad. The small creature angrily complained about being named without permission. It reminded them that it already had a name of its own. Little Nari, however, simply looked at it curiously, unfazed by its protest. She poured a bucket of water over the small creature, thinking it was thirsty because it kept making noises. She believed giving it more water would help it stop crying, but little Nari panicked as she saw the creature puffing up like a blowfish and asked her uncle what to do. The little creature weakly begged for the water to stop. Watching this, Cheondu realized that Nari doesn't understand that creature's language. He calmly told her that the creature had already had enough water. Little Nari suddenly realized the creature might be hungry. With excitement, she shouted that she would go find some food for it, and quickly ran off. After she left, Cheondu noticed that many small tasks were piling up. To stay organized, he decided it would be best to build a storage cabinet. He measured the logs, and thought to himself that the cabinet should be about this size. It didn't need to be too big, just enough to serve its purpose. With his hand blade, he tries to cut the log, but it broke in pieces, making Cheondu paused in surprise, not expecting it to cut so easily. He stood puzzled and muttered to himself, wondering what went wrong, since he had built it the same way he had made the table and chair. The little creature, wrapped in bandages, clicked its tongue, and explained that the wood was different. It pointed out that the one in front of him was soft wood, easy to break. Hearing that, Cheondu realized that wood strength varied by type and asked about it. The creature, surprised, said it was obvious, and couldn't believe he didn't know. Curious, Cheondu then asked which color wood was the strongest. The creature confidently began to say that the strongest wood was obviously the red one, but then it suddenly froze in shock, its eyes widening in surprise. The creature panicked, and asked if the man had just understood what it said. Cheondu, deep in thought, muttered to himself about red wood. Ignoring him, the creature grew cautious, and thought to itself that although it seemed impossible, it should try just in case. With glowing eyes, it decided to attempt reading the man's mind. The creature activated its ability, and a glowing light surrounded it. It used telepathy to read thoughts directly. But Cheondu Chimera power activated and looked through the whole forest carefully. But no matter how hard he searched, he couldn't see any red wood. He wondered if the red wood might only grow in a different place. Meanwhile, the small creature was shocked. Realizing that Cheondu had blocked its telepathy instantly, it thought to itself that it was even more than just blocking. It nervously asked in disbelief if Cheondu could actually hear its thoughts. Cheondu explained that it wasn't exactly like hearing a voice. Instead, the words simply appeared in his mind. Then, with a serious look, he added that there was something even more important to discuss. He pointed out that it was even stranger for a monster to understand human speech. The little creature froze, startled, and stammered, "That's..." Seeing his hesitation, Cheondu realized that the creature must be one of the rare intelligent monsters that are born against all odds. Though he had heard of such beings before, this was his first time seeing one in person. He looked closely, and asked calmly if they had met before. The creature said yes, and admitted that it had really wanted to see him again. Surprised, Cheondu asked why it felt that way. The creature said that it didn't matter why, but Cheondu had saved its life. Because of that, it wanted to repay him and help if they ever met again. Hearing that, Cheondu realized that back then, he had removed the poison, which allowed the creature's immortal core to survive. That was why it managed to live. He asked if the creature could help him now. Surprised, the little creature nervously responded, asking if he meant right at that moment. The little creature's eye widened, showing its nervousness and hesitation at the Cheondu's request. But the small creature agreed with determination. It spread its wings and declared that it would guide Cheondu to the place where the red trees grew. Meanwhile, inside the forest, little Nari, who goes to get some food for small creatures, screamed in fear, running desperately as fireballs blazed behind her. With tears in her eyes, she cried out for it to go away, shouting that she hated the lab. Little Nari ran as flames burned behind her. Tears streamed down her face as she cried out in pain, shouting that it was too hot. Suddenly fell face down on the ground, and that fireball hit the wall in front, and a massive explosion erupted in front of her, flames and debris scattering everywhere. Seeing that, little Nari trembled in fear, tears streaming down her face. She thought the lab had come to capture her. Panic filled her mind as she cried, terrified of the flames, admitting she hated fire more than anything. On the other hand, a person held a device showing a radar with a red dot. Watching it closely, they confirmed without doubt that she was the mechanical creature, the one capable of freely changing its shape. A tall man with long hair walked calmly through the raging flames, his expression cold and serious. Fire surrounded him, but he seemed completely unfazed, holding burning energy in his hand as he stepped forward with authority. The man stared ahead with a cold, serious expression. Surrounded by flames, he admitted to himself that it didn't feel right to attack a child, but he was prepared to do it anyway. The man's eyes burned with determination as flames swirled in his hand. He shouted fiercely, explaining that his life was at stake, hoping the child would understand why he had to fight. The man thrust his hand forward, unleashing a massive wave of fire. Flames roared violently, rushing toward little Nari, who looked tiny and helpless in the distance. The man shouted that this was the end. As flames rushed forward, little Nari's eyes widened in fear, tears streaming down her face, her body frozen in shock as she realized the danger closing in. Just then, with small creature perched on his shoulder, Cheondu appeared right in front of little Nari, stopping the fire with his bare hands. Behind him, frightened little Nari wiped away her tears. Cheondu thought to himself that all he had wanted was to finish building the cabinet and eat in peace. But now he was forced into this fight. The small creature's eyes glowed with determination as it used its telekinesis, and told Cheondu it would reveal the location of the trees later. For now, saving the child was the top priority. Cheondu's eyes glowed with determination, ready to act. Kim Nari sat trembling on the ground, clutching her head as she muttered for the fire to go away. Seeing her, Cheondu realized she is terrified of the flames, and clearly not in a stable state of mind. He calmly said to the small creature that they should put out the fire first. The small creature on his shoulder agreed, angry at the thought of someone bullying a child, calling it the act of a scumbag. Seeing Cheondu, the man cloaked in flames glared fiercely and demanded, "You're clearly not some caveman. Whose side are you on?" He narrowed his eyes and added, "You're after the mechanical creature too, aren't you? Then listen carefully. I'll only say this once. Leave while you still can." Both Cheondu and that fire guy stood across from each other, tension filling the air. One was wreathed in flames, while the other remained calm and steady. Breaking the silence, the Cheondu spoke firmly, "You talk too much." This made the fire guy, engulfed in flames, roared in fury. He shouted that his opponent was getting cocky, his rage spilling out with the fire around him. Then, with gritted teeth, he growled not to ruin the moment. Fire guy, consumed by fury and flames, shouted loudly for his opponent to get lost. With fire blazing around him, he slammed his hands into the ground, sending out a powerful fiery attack. Seeing that Cheondu stood firm with a serious expression, his eyes sharp with focus, he raised his hand and pointed forward, a bright blue light shining from his fingers. Cheondu pointed forward, releasing a powerful burst of blue energy that clashed against that fire guy's fiery attack. Cheondu's attack created a massive explosion of light and force as it hit the mountain behind the fire guy. An explosion erupted with a blinding light, shocking the fire guy. His eyes widened in disbelief as he muttered in confusion, "What the?" The fire guy's face twisted in shock as debris rained down around him. His eyes widened, and sweat ran down his face as he gasped in disbelief, too stunned to speak. Only a cry of alarm escaped him. As the dust and debris settled inside the massive crater, Cheon-do asked little Nari gently if she was okay. Little Nari replied she was fine now. She wiped her tears, her voice soft with relief. She said that uncle had put out the fire, feeling safer now. Looking at Kim Nari, Cheon-do spoke calmly. He told her that whenever she felt scared, she should face it directly and defeat the fear itself. Meanwhile, the fire guy lay battered and motionless on the ground. Cheon-do grabbed the fire guy by the hair and said firmly that when they woke up, they should knock it off, saying that he swung up that fire guy into the air. But just as he held the enemy up by their hair, paused, his eyes widening in surprise as he realized something was off. Cheon-do looked back and saw that the fire guy lay on the ground and his head now bald. Cheon-do looked at him in confusion and exclaimed, "What the heck is this?" Looking at the fire guy's bald head, Cheon-do wondered if he had always been bald. The small creature sitting on little Nari's head was very annoyed and called the fire guy a little brat. Even little Nari looked at him with wide eyes, clearly confused, as the sunlight reflected off the smooth surface of a shiny head, revealing it to be completely bald. Little Nari quietly muttered the word, "bald," in surprise. She burst into laughter, holding her stomach and tearing up from how hard she was laughing. She found the bald head hilarious and shouted that being bald was funny. Little Nari laughed loudly, calling the fire guy Baldy. She said she wasn't scared of him anymore. Hearing this, the Cheon-do looked at her in silence. He was confused because while he was fighting that fire guy, he realized that the opponent was not strong enough to defeat little Nari. Just then the small eyes glowed brightly as it prepared to use its power. It explained that this would make everything clear. The ability, called mental resonance, allowed him to look into another person's memories. Suddenly Cheon-do's eyes also glowed with a golden light as the power flowed through him. Little creature's ability not only allowed it to look into memories, but also to share those memories with others. In little Nari's memories, Cheon-do saw a dark room. There a man in a lab coat stood before a glowing screen, his posture tense as he leaned on the table. A low, unsettling laugh escaped him, echoing through the room. The man's glasses glowed brightly, hiding his eyes as he grinned with a twisted smile. His expression was filled with a sinister excitement. A small slime creature trembled nervously, its round eyes showing fear as it shifted on the floor. It was little Nari when she was just made. Watching her reaction, the man remarked that it seemed to be dodging him now, and noted that the slime had finally started to develop a sense of self. The man stretched out his hand, blue flames burning around his fingers. His voice was cold and commanding as he called out to the slime, telling it to come closer. The man spoke in a cold, dismissive tone, saying there was nothing to fear. To him, this was just another durability test, nothing more. A loud scream echoed as that man burned Miss Little Nari with fire. Seeing all that, Cheon-do finally understood everything. He gently placed his hand on little Nari's head and praised her, saying she did well. Little Nari looked up at him in confusion, not fully understanding. Cheon-do thought to himself that trauma doesn't disappear so easily, but perhaps this was the first step toward healing. Then looking at that bald guy, Cheon-do wondered what they should do about him. Little creature tapped the bald guy's head, checking if he's awake. Suddenly, little Nari got an idea. Little Nari stood proudly with her hands on her hips. Stars sparkled around her as she announced with confidence that she had a great idea. Then few minutes later, that bald man was tied by ropes was held down a waterfall. Water surged powerfully, making his coat and boots were soaked. Seeing him, little Nari shouted excitedly that if he got wet, his fire would go out. And now the bald uncle wasn't scary anymore. The bald man stood there, soaked and stunned, water dripping from his face. He admitted with frustration that this wasn't the reason he came to the demon world. When little Nari saw that bald man had awakened, she angrily pointed at the bald under the waterfall and called him a bad bald uncle. The soaked man clenched his fists in frustration, thinking to himself in annoyance. Meanwhile, Cheon-do nearby reminded little Nari not to judge people based only on their looks. Little Nari smirked mischievously, while Cheon-do calmly held a pot with a gentle smile. Watching her reaction, he thought to himself that maybe she would recover faster than he had expected. Then Cheon-do crouched by the river, filling a pot with water. The little creature flew nearby, watching him closely and asking what he was doing. Calmly, Cheon-do replied that he was getting water to make ramen. Hearing that, Kim Nari shouted with excitement, declaring that uncle's fish ramen was the best. Cheon-do glanced at her with a faint smile and asked in disbelief, "Really?" Cheon-do asked if the coconut tribe also ate fish ramen. Flustered, Kim Nari quickly raised her fists and shouted that they did, insisting that the coconut tribe loved ramen. Meanwhile, Water splashed on that bald guy. Water dripped down the man's face as he narrowed his eyes. From his sharp gaze, he judged that Cheon-do was at least an A-plus class hunter. He thought to himself that Cheon-do might be even stronger, just hiding his true ability. Meanwhile, Kim Nari splashed into the water with her legs kicking, shouting that she would catch the fish. Beside her, Cheon-do calmly held a pot, watching her. Looking at him, the bald man thought to himself that Cheon-do was probably a reclusive hunter living off the grid. Meanwhile, Cheon-do looked at the water and muttered that he would need more if he was cooking for 3. Seeing them preparing to make ramen frustrated, bald guy thought that catching someone and then sitting down to eat ramen, even for the demon world. This situation felt completely wrong and messed up. Suddenly, little Nari burst out of the water with a fierce expression, holding up 2 large, sharp-toothed fish in her hands, while another clung to her head. With excitement, she shouted proudly to her uncle that she had caught a fish. Cheon-do told little Nari to give him just 1 fish, and release the rest back into the water. Seeing that fish, that bald guy got shocked. Little Nari quickly agreed, and urged him to hurry so she could toss it in. The bald man stared nervously at the strange fish, sweat running down his face. He wondered what these creatures were, and worried that using one would only make the broth smell terrible. Little Nari dropped the strange fish into the pot filled with water, causing it to splash. Watching this, the bald man grew more uneasy, wondering why Cheon-do was using so much water in the first place. Frustrated, the bald man wondered if they even knew how ramen was supposed to be made. Meanwhile, little Nari happily ran forward with small creature sitting on her head, cheering that it was ramen time and that she was excited. Cheon-do calmly followed behind, holding the pot of water. Bald man suddenly shouted for them to wait. Kim Nari stopped in her tracks. Cheon-do also stopped behind, looking slightly confused. The bald man struggled in the rushing water, looking desperate. He asked if they could finally let him down. With frustration in his voice, he shouted that he would cook the meal himself. And then, few minutes later, the bald man stood at a wooden table under a spotlight, placing a packet of ramen on it. To some, ramen was just food. But as he carefully opened the packet with trembling hands, he thought differently. For him, at that moment, it wasn't just ramen, it was life or death. Cheon-do and little Nari, along with the small creature, sat nearby with dark expressions, silently watching, their red eyes glowing with hunger and anticipation. The bald man reminded himself, ramen must be made with sincerity. He decided to stick to the basics, since he didn't know anything fancy anyway. The bald man stood in front of a pot, focused and serious. He trusted his instincts to decide the amount of water, since he was cooking 3 servings. He added the noodles and soup base into the boiling water, knowing it had to cook for exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds. With his heartbeat steady at 60 per minute, he decided to count 270 beats to track the perfect time. As the seconds passed, he concentrated deeply, his heartbeats guiding him. Finally, when the time was right, he lifted the noodles high into the air, shouting his technique. Air shower. It was a crucial step. Exposing noodles to air, like that, adds that perfect chewy texture in noodles. Sweating but determined, the bald man thought how kimchi would have made the dish complete, but reminded himself that this was the demon world. Still, he smiled, knowing he gave it his best. The ramen was finished, and he had no regrets. The pot of noodles gleamed, labeled as Nam-gi's sincerity. Ramen. It had 90 flavor scored, 24 carbs, 18 protein, 20 calcium, and 20 fat. The bald man carefully served the ramen, offering it to the others, and asking them to give it a try. Little Nari looked surprised, noting that it felt different from the uncle's ramen. Cheon-do agreed, and prepared to taste it. Cheon-do took a bite, saying he would see how it tasted. Soon, the 3 of them, including the small creature, sat at the table together, eating the ramen. As they tasted it, their eyes widened in shock. Cheon-do, the girl, and the small creature all realized something at the same time. This taste was special. They were overwhelmed, as if transported to another world. Well, basically they were in another world, but it felt completely different world. They thought to themselves that this was not just food. This was the true taste of sincerity. Little Nari's face lit up with joy as she exclaimed how delicious it was. The small creature chirped, asking if humans ate such food all the time. Cheon-do smiled, admitting even he was impressed, before suggesting they eat first. After the meal, the small creature lay on the table, completely full and exhausted, letting out a satisfied sound. Cheon-do also placed his chopsticks on the table after eating. The bald man laughed nervously and asked if the food suited their taste. Cheon-do, little Nari, and the small creature had already finished eating, their bowls completely empty. Cheon-do stayed quiet for a moment. Then, with a serious look, he told the man to name his price. The bald man was shocked and confused. Cheon-do explained that the meal was far too good to eat for free. He insisted that the bald man ask for something in return, and if it was within his ability, he would grant it. Surprised, the bald man asked if he really meant it. When Cheon-do confirmed, the bald man dropped to the ground, bowing deeply, and shouted for him to teach him. The man revealed his name, Hunter Nam-gi, and begged to be trained. He declared that he wanted to become strong like Cheon-do. Cheon-do looked confused, asking why he was being called that, and what Nam meant by teach. Nam-gi, still bowing, praised Cheon-do as the strongest hunter he had ever met. He assumed Cheon-do must be here for a long-term mission, judging by his house. Desperate, Nam-gi tried to convince him further. He claimed he could cook many other dishes and even had certifications, though he admitted he didn't really. He shouted that his father owned a fried chicken shop, and that he could make amazing fried chicken. That was true. Pushing harder, Nam-gi pointed out how troublesome it must be to pass through the gate constantly for supplies and clothes. He offered to be Cheon-do's runner, handling errands for him. Finally, he promised to even pay any price Cheon-do wanted in exchange for lessons. The bald man knelt down before Cheon-do, his voice filled with desperation. He begged for the chance to train under him, declaring his dream of reaching A-class. Cheon-do, however, remained calm and asked only one question. He wanted to know the bald man's true reason for attacking little Nari. Was it really just for the bounty? The man stammered, confused, asking if Cheon-do meant the robot. Before he could finish, Cheon-do quickly whispered that they should stick with the Coconut Tribe story and play along. Realizing his mistake, the man nervously agreed. Lowering his head, tears forming in his eyes, he admitted that it was personal and difficult to explain. But soon his voice grew louder with emotion, as he cried out that he didn't care about rewards or little Nari at all. What mattered to him was passing the hunter rank test, nothing else. Cheon-do studied him for a moment before giving a simple command. He told the man to stand. Startled, the man asked why, but Cheon-do stood up, his body glowing faintly with energy. He explained that after enjoying a good meal, sparring was the least he could offer in return. The bald man's face lit up with gratitude as he bowed deeply. He thanked Cheon-do with all his heart. Just then, the little Nari suddenly spoke up. She slammed her small hands on the table and demanded to spar instead. Cheon-do turned to her and asked if she was certain. With fiery determination in her eyes, she recalled the lesson he had once given her. When you're afraid, knock it out. Holding on to those words, she declared that she wanted to face the challenge herself. Hearing that, the bald man chuckled nervously, trying to lighten the mood. He reminded little Nari that while Cheon-do was certainly strong, he himself wasn't exactly weak either. But little Nari's piercing gaze and unwavering silence made it clear. She wasn't going to back down. Cheon-do looked at Nam-gi-seok and asked if he could break the giant black stone in front of them. Nam-gi-seok froze in shock and quickly explained that the stone was obsidianite, a material said to be many times harder than diamonds. He nervously laughed, saying it was impossible to break unless one was at least an A-class hunter. But before he could finish his words, the stone suddenly shattered with a loud explosion, leaving him wide-eyed and trembling in disbelief. Nam-gi-seok froze, his face pale with shock as sweat trickled down his cheek. As he tried to process what just happened, Kim Nari stood up, her small body glowing with energy. She was the one who used her power to break that obsidian. With a fierce expression, she pointed her hand at him and declared with confidence, "Baldy uncle, come out. Let's spar." Nam-gi was known as a natural awakener, once considered a highly promising hunter. Unlike most people who awakened their powers in their late teens, he first awakened at just 8 years old. This made him an exceptionally rare case. With talent and relentless effort, he grew at an astonishing speed. Before even reaching the age of 20, he was already promoted to a B+ rank hunter. His rise was meteoric, and fame quickly followed. During those days, he dreamed of becoming the greatest hunter, and it felt like nothing was missing from his life. But there was one flaw that haunted him: his hair. While others his age were just beginning to awaken, he started losing his hair far too early. What began as thinning at the crown in his early 20s soon turned into a receding hairline by his mid-20s, forming a deep M shape. The once brilliant hunter, who carried such promise, now found himself staring at his own reflection in despair, clutching his thinning hair and crying out. Nam-gi tried everything to stop his hair from falling out. He went through countless treatments and visited every clinic he could find. Desperate, he told the doctor that he had money and could pay for another transplant, but the doctor only shook his head and said it would just fall out again, telling him to give up. Hearing that Nam-gi was left in despair and could only cry, despite his good looks and natural talent, nothing worked. Once, he had been someone who shined brighter than anyone else, but over time, that light began to fade. His career as a hunter also slowed down. In one test, he was disqualified, and people remarked that so much for him becoming A rank. With his dreams slipping away, Namgi sank deeper into frustration. At home, surrounded by bottles and trash, he lay on the couch watching TV. Then one day, a program featured Dr. Han Myung-do from the Hanbit Institute. The host asked him about an unusual case from his research. The doctor explained that liquid metal was a rare material, even in the demon world, but someone had accidentally spilled it on their head. By chance, it made their hair grow back. The doctor then revealed himself. His hair was full and long again. Smiling, he proudly announced that he was nearly 90 years old, yet thanks to liquid metal, his hair had returned. Seeing that Namgi was shocked, lying on the floor, he couldn't believe what he just heard. He gets very angry, asking what kind of bullshit is this. But because he could, the reporters laughed and asked the scientist if he would create a cure for baldness next. Hearing that, Namgi's eyes widened with sudden hope, his heart racing. But the doctor only laughed it off, saying that the mysterious demon world reminded him of how little they understood. He spoke about serving humanity as an awakener, creating more mechanical beings, and aiming for Korea's first major award. Hearing this, Namgi clenched his fists. Why? He thought. Why chase awards when a real cure could change lives? He screamed in anger, smashing a bottle. Just make a cure for baldness. That would actually help humanity. But it was no use. No one heard him. Then a few days later, he read shocking news. Hanbit Institute's mechanical creature had accidentally fallen into the demon world. Seeing that, Namgi's eyes lit up because he knows that in the demon world, there were no rules, only survival. That meant whoever found it could claim it. Determined, Namgi swore to himself that he will find it and will dump it on his head, noting that no matter what, it will be his. And now here he was, thrown to the ground, his face covered in dirt. Shocked, he muttered in disbelief, unsure of what had just happened. He realized he had been defeated once again. Little Nari, standing before him, celebrated cheerfully, while Cheon-do shook his head, remarking that Namgi couldn't land even a single clean hit. While working with wood, Cheon-do warned Namgi sternly that if he kept performing this poorly, he wouldn't be allowed to take shuttle duty. Panicking, Namgi quickly promised to do better, begging for another chance. Cheon-do proudly admired the cabinet he had just finished building. It felt strong and sturdy, likely because it was crafted from redwood. The small creature by his side agreed, noting it would last a long time. From a distance, Cheon-do then looked at Namgi, who had been beaten earlier. He couldn't help but think that the Namgi had guts. Despite being beaten all day, he still stood tall and full of energy. Clenching his fists, Namgi summoned flames in his hands. Seeing that, Cheon-do wondered why Namgi seemed so full of energy. Then a thought crossed his mind. Maybe it was because the Namgi had taken off his wig. Fueled by fiery determination, Namgi shouted, asking Little Nari for another match, his flames burning brightly as he prepared to fight once more. Small creature, observing the scene, admitted that Namgi's flame ability wasn't bad, but if he couldn't even beat a kid, it wasn't impressive. Hearing that, Cheon-do calmly pointed out that Kim Nari wasn't an ordinary child. Namgi charged forward with flames trailing behind him, shouting that this time he would surely win. Little Nari stood her ground confidently and told him to bring it on. With fiery force, the Namgi slammed down, creating a massive explosion. But to his shock, Little Nari's body suddenly melted into a liquid form, slipping away unharmed. Namgi stared wide-eyed, stunned, and muttered in disbelief that she had liquefied. Before he could react further, Little Nari reappeared behind him and kicked him into the stomach with overwhelming strength, sending Namgi flying crashing into the wall behind. The impact shook the area, leaving Namgi buried in rubble of the wall while Little Nari landed gracefully. She stood proudly, laughing, and declared that she was no longer afraid of fire, thanks to him. Lying in the crater, Namgi let out a tired laugh. He wondered if this was the limit of a lifelong B rank, admitting to himself that he had run out of techniques. But then, determination sparked in his eyes. Refusing to give up, he pushed himself back to his feet. He told himself he would stand again, because where else could a washed-up man like him experience such a battle? Namgi, the man who didn't know how to quit, rose once more. Smiling through the pain, he shouted for just one more match against Kim Nari, refusing to back down. But Namgi suddenly felt something warm drip from his nose. Startled, he touched his face and realized he had a nosebleed. Seeing that, Cheon-do asked him how long it had been since Namgi arrived in the demon world. Namgi thought for a moment before replying that, "Today makes day 9. Hearing that, Cheon-do's expression grew serious. He warned that at Namgi's current level, Staying in the demon world any longer might kill him because of the demonic energy. Namgi hesitated, but eventually admitted that it made sense. Still, Cheon-du looked at him with confidence, and told Namgi that he saw A-rank potential in him, encouraging him to give his best. Shocked, Namgi pointed at himself in disbelief, but Namgi lowered his head, confessing that he had failed the A-rank test for 6 years straight. He explained that most people considered it hopeless after failing the same test for 3 years, and there had never been a case in history of someone succeeding after so many failures. But Cheon-du disagreed. He told Namgi that he still had room to grow, and that his mana hole wasn't fully developed yet. With a firm voice, he told him not to give up. Hearing those words, Namgi's eyes welled up with tears. Overwhelmed, Cheon-du gave him one last piece of advice, telling him to cleanse the demonic energy properly once he returned. Nam bowed deeply, his heart burning with determination. He shouted his thanks, vowing to give it his all. As Nam's voice echoed, Cheon-du thought to himself that he will make Namgi into an A-rank. An A-rank laborer, that is. Then few minutes later, Namgi, carrying supplies, asked if there was anything else they needed. He mentioned that they were out of ramen. At the sound of the word, the little Nari's eyes lit up, and she jumped happily. Cheon-du nodded calmly, saying that was enough for now. Namgi with the backpack agreed, and said he would go grab some. Before leaving, little Nari wished Namgi safety, while he shouted back that he would definitely win next time. Suddenly, he asked the Cheon-du if he had seen his wig. Cheon-du shook his head, and replied that he hadn't. With a nervous laugh, Namgi decided to head back anyway, still wondering where it had gone. Once he disappeared, little creature looked uneasy. It asked if things would really be okay. Cheon-du turned to it, puzzled, and asked what it meant. Little creature explained that if Namgi betrayed them, it could be dangerous, and he might even bring other hunters. Cheon-du reminded it that it could read memories and asked what it thought. Little creature thought back and recalled how serious the Namgi had been about getting stronger. Even his baldness was genuine. At the very least, his sincerity made him likable. Smiling faintly, Cheon-du admitted that Namgi might actually be worth investing in. Hearing him talking, little Nari asked her uncle if could really understand what Ku, the small creature on her head, was saying. Cheon-du casually replied that he could, in fact, understand Ku's speech. Then both of them went inside the house. Cheon-du proudly showed the cabinet he had built, explaining that he had done it with Ku's advice. The house looked tidier now, though little Nari pointed out that it still felt a bit dark inside. Hearing that, Cheon-du paused, then asked if she wanted a window. Without waiting long, he used his sword-like hand and cut into the wall, but suddenly sparks stared flying beside him until a clean opening appeared. It was little Nari who used her eyes' lasers to create a small window for herself. She cheered happily that brightness was better. Cheon-du simply nodded in satisfaction, but he reminded her that at night they would still need a proper light source. Curious, little Nari asked how they could get one. Cheon-du explained about glowstones, crystals that shined in the dark. A few of them on the ceiling would keep the room bright. Hearing that, little creature Ku frowned and asked if he even knew where to find them. Calmly, Cheon-du answered that glowstones could be found in volcanic zones. Hearing that, Ku's expression grew serious. Volcanic zones, after all, were some of the most dangerous areas for hunters. And there was more thing. Ku lowered his head, his voice heavy as he admitted that the volcanic zone was where he came from. The thought of returning made him uneasy. Hearing that, Cheon-du couldn't understand why Ku looked so gloomy. After all, going back home should have been a good thing. Curious, little Nari hugged Ku tightly and asked her uncle what it was saying, noting that Ku's tone sounded strange, almost upset. Hearing that, Ku frowned, realizing little Nari was sharper than expected, noticing things that others might miss. Cheon-du told her that Ku was worried about them going to the volcanic zone. He suggested going alone, telling little Nari and Ku to stay behind, but little Nari crossed her arms and refused. She declared that she wanted to go too, saying she wasn't afraid of fire anymore. Her determination surprised Cheon-du. He hadn't expected her to overcome her fear so quickly. When he asked Ku, Ku also agreed to go. It admitted it had unfinished matters to deal with in the volcanic zone. Seeing their resolve, Cheon-du finally smiled and agreed. He told them all to prepare, but first, he would craft special gear to withstand the volcanic zone, and use the spider monster's power. At the same time, in the volcanic zone, the ground trembled as the volcano erupted, spitting out fire and smoke. From within the thick smoke, a pair of glowing eyes appeared, sharp and menacing. A low rumble echoed as a massive shadow began to rise, shaking the entire volcanic zone. Something terrifying had awakened from the heart of the volcano where Cheon-du, little Nari and Ku are headed next. The group entered the volcanic region, one of the 3 most dangerous places in the demon world. Hunters usually avoided it because of the flying volcanic ash, toxic gases, and the heavy demonic energy in the air that made breathing difficult. Ku explained that very little was known about this place in the human world. As he spoke, he noticed little Nari happily playing around the lava, treating it like a game. Ku could only stare in disbelief at her reckless behavior, asking what that child was doing right now. Cheon-do acted normal, and told Ku that she was just playing with fire. Ku remarked that it was normal for little Nari since she was originally a mechanical creature, but then turned to Cheon-do, wondering how he was perfectly fine in such a deadly place. Cheon-do revealed that he was a chimera hunter. Ku had guessed that much, but asked him why he looked so human since chimera hunters normally didn't. Cheon-do told him that he used to look like that too, but after regenerating, he had ended up with a human appearance again. Cheon-do then asked if Ku was truly comfortable being with them, reminding him that he was still a monster, and hunters usually hated monsters. But Ku simply answered that it wasn't so bad. He said it was nice to have someone to talk to, and Cheon-do didn't seem like bad people. Hearing that, Cheon-do gave a small smile, saying that's a relief. Then little Nari returned to them. Her small feet stepped on the hot surface, but she didn't seem bothered because of the custom-made shoes that Cheon-do made for her. Little Nari called out, asking if Cheon-do was speaking with Gu again, and eagerly said she wanted to talk with Gu too. Cheon-do reminded her that earlier she had asked about his identity, hinting he was about to explain. Excitedly, little Nari declared that since Cheon-do was a native of the demon world, she was one too. But Ku quickly corrected her, grumbling that he was the true native here, calling her a cheeky kid. They pressed on, heading deeper into the volcanic region. Ku explained that the luminous stones they were searching for would likely be near the lava's eruption point. That meant they had to reach the crater. As they climbed higher, little Nari's eyes widened when she saw the great summit. Overjoyed, she rushed forward and shouted that they had reached the top, raising her arms in triumph. Ku perched on her head while Cheon-do calmly followed behind. From the summit, they spotted the luminous stones glowing near the crater. But before they could get closer, something unexpected appeared. Out from the smoke and heat emerged a large fire toad, its skin glowing with bright patterns. Cheon-do narrowed his eyes, recognizing the creature. He muttered that it was indeed a fire toad. Strangely, the toad's eyes were filled with tears, and as they looked closer, they realized it was crying. Little Nari pointed ahead with urgency, her eyes wide. She shouted for Cheon-do to look, warning him that there was another creature up ahead. Ku, sitting on her head, also looked in the same direction. Down by the crater, they saw the truth. A female fire toad had collapsed and died while moving. Its back was covered with eggs, showing it was carrying young. Ku explained in a serious tone that female fire toads always carried their eggs on their backs after laying them. Only females in the breeding season had a sunken back like that. But since this one had died, all of its eggs were doomed as well. The heat of the crater was far too intense, and none of the eggs would survive. The sight was grim. Little Nari's voice softened with pity. She said the poor fire toad must be sad because its partner had died. Cheon-do, however, remained quiet, his expression unreadable as he watched the scene unfold. Suddenly, Cheon-do told little Nari to stay behind and wait. Pressing his foot firmly on the ground, he launched himself forward with great speed. Startled, little Nari called after him, asking where he was going. She watched as he leapt down the rocky slope, heading straight toward the giant fire toad. Cheon-do landed powerfully in front of the creature, his body steady despite the heat and smoke around him. Ku panicked, shouting for him to come back quickly. He warned that the fire toad was extremely sensitive at that moment, and that getting too close was dangerous. But Cheon-do ignored the warnings, his expression calm and focused. The fire toad glared at him, its throat glowing before it unleashed a burst of scorching flames. The air shook as the fiery breath erupted toward him. Little Nari cried out in fear, calling his name. Yet instead of retreating, Cheon-do charged straight through the fire. His figure, which had a sharp spike coming out, cut through the blazing flames and he emerged unharmed. He stood directly before the massive beast and placed one finger on the fire toad's head as he pierced that sharp spike into it. Instead of attacking again, the fire toad stopped trembling and lowered its head. Cheon-do, speaking softly, told it to stay still just like that. Slowly, the toad calmed down, its heavy breathing easing under his touch. From that sharp spike, Cheon-do carefully used the paralysis toxin of the Neko cobra. He only applied a small amount, enough to calm the fire toad without harming it. Since fire toads were naturally immune to the toxin, he knew the creature would wake up soon. From a distance, little Nari shouted anxiously, asking if he was all right. Cheon-do turned his head back and gave her a reassuring smile, telling her that he was fine. He explained that the reason he could stand so close without being harmed was because fire toad cells existed inside his body. Looking at the fallen creatures, he admitted he couldn't do anything for the ones already dead, but he believed the living ones could still be saved. His eyes shifted to the cluster of glowing eggs. He said the eggs carrying life would survive. A few minutes later, the fire toad opened its eyes. By then, Cheon-do had secured the fire toad eggs tightly with bindings on the male fire toad, saying it should be fine until it regained its strength. The toad let out a low sound, as if speaking, but suddenly, Cheon-do saw something surprising. He saw the male fire toad rubbing his head against the female fire toad. Seeing that, Cheon-do paused, wondering if the creature was saying its final goodbye to its fallen companion. Then the fire toad scraped against the ground, and in an instant, it leapt powerfully into the air. Little Nari could only watch in shock as the bound creature soared upward. She gasped, her voice breaking out in surprise, unable to believe what she was seeing. The toad landed with a heavy crash, shaking the ground beneath. Slowly, its massive eye turned, glowing faintly as it looked straight at her. For a moment, it felt as though the beast was trying to convey something. Little Nari's wide golden eyes reflected her astonishment as she stared back. Then, with another powerful jump, the fire toad launched itself into the distance. Little Nari quickly turned to Cheon-do, her voice filled with wonder. She said that the fire toad had looked their way, and that it almost seemed like it was giving thanks. Cheon-do, in a steady tone, remarked that the toad must have seen its dead mate. Then, turning his focus back to Little Nari, Cheon-do told her to come down so they could mine the luminous stone quickly and return home. Hearing this, Little Nari's face brightened with excitement. She answered eagerly, saying they should dig it up fast and head home together. Little Nari's small hands gripped a glowing stone tightly, pulling it free from the rocky wall. Her face lit up with excitement as she lifted it above her head, proudly showing it off. "It came out!" she shouted happily, her golden eyes sparkling with joy. The stone shone beautifully in her hands, casting light all around. Completely mesmerized, Cheon-do, standing nearby, gave her a calm warning. He told her to be careful, reminding her that if she dropped the stone, it could hurt her foot. Ku also dug out a luminous stone and flew back with his small wings while carrying the stone. He placed the glowing crystal carefully into the bag, its light shining through the fabric. Ku fell on the ground, and Cheon-do, noticing its weariness, asked gently if it was okay, pointing out that it looked tired. Ku muttered with frustration. It recalled how it used to toss such stones around playfully without effort, but now, in its shrunken form, it could barely manage. Cheon-do reassured it, saying it didn't have to help. He suggested Ku could focus on its own errands instead, adding that the gifts Ku carried were probably meant for the friends it was planning to meet. Flustered, Ku puffed up angrily. "What friends does a monster like me even have?" it snapped, insisting it didn't plan to meet anyone. It explained the gifts were just things it intended to leave behind, nothing more. Hearing that, Cheon-do smiled, realizing that Ku was just shy. Cheon-do teased Ku for missing his own kind, saying intelligent monsters were different. Ku quickly denied missing them, insisting it only regretted not being able to say goodbye before leaving. Hearing that, Cheon-do asked it why it really left its group. Ku hesitated. It remembered the times when it first gained intelligence, how there were good things about it. It could think about everything, question itself. But there were also bad things too. It recalled moments with others of its kind, even as they argued over simple things. One of them carelessly ate something without thought, leaving Ku frustrated and realizing that communication didn't always help. Among groups like the one-eyed monkeys, it often felt out of place. Knowing their language only made the emptiness stronger. In the end, it chose to leave the group behind and live alone. Ku thought to itself that maybe its kind didn't even notice when it left. After all, they never had much sense of companionship to begin with. Saying that, it struggled with a stone and groaned in frustration, wondering why it wasn't coming loose. But suddenly, the stone came out, and Ku slipped, its eyes widening in shock as it lost balance. A loud crack echoed through the cave, making Little Nari's eyes widen as she exclaimed that she had heard a noise. When they looked closer, Little Nari pointed excitedly that it was an egg. Cheon-do observed carefully, and confirmed it was indeed a monster egg, though he wasn't sure what kind it belonged to. On closer inspection, they noticed a small crack, possibly caused when Ku had dropped a luminous stone onto it. Looking at the cracked egg, Cheon-do explained that the baby inside should break the shell on its own, as that was how it would grow healthy and strong. Little Nari, however, was unsure what they should do. After a moment of thought, she insisted they take the egg with them, worried that if they left it behind, it would be roasted by the heat of the cave. But Cheon-do hesitated, uncertain, while Ku panicked at the idea of something hatching. Still, Little Nari's determination remained firm, her wide eyes fixed on the egg as the group sat together, facing the decision of what to do next. Cheon-do thought quietly and realized there was actually a safe spot near their house that could serve as a nest. He was also curious about what was inside. Finally, he decided they would take the egg. Hearing that, little Nari happily volunteered to carry it, while Ku protested, saying no sane person would take such a strange egg. But Cheon-do asked Ku, who told it to drop a luminous stone onto it. Hearing that, Ku got flustered but questioned what if little Nari got in danger. Cheon-do reassured it that everything would be fine, promising to protect them. Reluctantly, Ku agreed, trusting him. With the decision made, Cheon-do said they should finish mining more luminous stones. Little Nari cheered in excitement, eager to dig quickly and return home. After some time, the group finally returned home from their journey. Little Nari proudly announced their arrival while holding the mysterious egg tightly in her arms, excitement shining in her eyes. Ku rested on her head, looking wary but following along. As they approached the camp, Nam-gi called out, asking where they had been. Cheon-do was surprised to see that he had returned so quickly. Stepping forward, Nam-gi offered to carry the luggage, but looking at him, Cheon-do felt something was wrong. As Cheon-do gave him the bag, he warned Nam-gi that it was heavy. Trying to act strong, Nam-gi laughed and insisted he could handle it. However, as soon as he grabbed it, the bag fell to the ground. The weight was overwhelming, and Nam-gi struggled under the burden, nearly collapsing. Shocked, he asked what could possibly be inside that made it so heavy. At that moment, Cheon-do saw his face. He asked Nam-gi to raise his head. Nam-gi's face was covered in scratches and bruises. Cheon-do asked him what had happened, wondering if he had been beaten up somewhere. Cheon-do looked at him with surprise, admitting that he never thought Nam-gi was the type to get beaten so easily. Nam-gi scratched his head with an awkward smile, trying to brush it off. He explained that it wasn't what they thought. Little Nari often beat him up during training. Hearing this, Cheon-do was shocked. He couldn't believe Nam-gi said it so proudly. Before the conversation could continue, Nam-gi quickly changed the subject, running off in a panic and saying he would serve food right away. Cheon-do stood silently, arms crossed, watching him with an unreadable expression. Then Cheon-do sat at a small wooden table, carefully cutting and shaping a glowing stone with his finger blade. Seeing that, little Nari, curious as always, came up to him and asked what he was making. Cheon-do calmly explained that he was crafting a lamp out of glowstones. Little Nari's golden eyes widened in excitement when she heard he planned to hang it from the ceiling, imagining how pretty it would look. She watched him work with admiration, telling him she thought he was really smart. To her, he seemed knowledgeable, and always explained things so well. Remembering the toad incident, she also felt that he wasn't just smart, he was kind-hearted too, much like her father. With a bright smile, she said that Cheon-do reminded her of her dad. Hearing that, Cheon-do teasingly asked her if her father was doing well back in the coconut tribe. Nari's expression faltered, and she stiffened for a moment before forcing a smile. She quickly answered that her father was fine, though her unease showed in her trembling voice. As the sun set, the sky turned a warm shade of orange, filling the air with a gentle glow. Ku lay on the ground, feeling the heat. It wasn't as intense as the volcanic zone, but to him, it still felt like his body was melting. He soon dozed off, resting peacefully, until the ground trembled. From the horizon, Mandragora with glowing red eyes appeared, their heavy footsteps echoing against the sunset. They marched forward with intimidating force, surrounding Ku. Furious, they looked at Ku with their red, glowing eyes. Suddenly, the smallest Mandragora leapt, its attacks sharp and fast, but instead of a fight, it spun very fast and used its triple snuggle formation ultimate move. But as it hit, that little Mandragora bounced off Ku's round body in surprise as it flew back. Ku blinked awake, confused by the sudden chaos. Immediately all three of the Mandragora attacked him with their small hands that did no damage to Ku. Ku was surprised. "What's this? What's gotten into you guys?" he muttered, staring at the little Mandragora hopping around and making noise. From a distance, little Nari shouted, demanding to know why everyone was fighting. Cheon-do calmly explained that it looked like the Mandragora were angry because Ku had wandered into their territory. Just then, Nam-gi proudly revealed the dish he had prepared, saying the wait was finally over. He explained that it was sweet, sour, and addictive, something children especially loved. On the plate was yubuchobap, fried tofu pockets stuffed with rice. The food looked delicious and came with its own description. Nam Ki-seok's heartfelt tofu pockets, praised for their taste and balance of nutrition. Nam-gi was proud and smiled as he noted that tofu pockets were simple to make but always looked impressive. At the table, everyone gathered around, their plates filled with the golden brown snacks. Little Nari was amazed, praising Nam-gi for his cooking, but Ku, not satisfied, said it looked decent enough. Nam-gi laughed cheerfully, telling everyone to dig in and enjoy the meal. But before they could continue, Cheon-do paused and asked about Nam-gi's face. He pointed out that the question had been avoided earlier, and wanted to know what had happened. Nam-gi scratched the back of his head nervously, and admitted that he had gone to the Hunter Association to apply for the promotion exam. There, he ran into some A-class hunters who mocked him for failing 7 times. The teasing turned into a fight, which explained his injuries. He explained that they had told him to stop wasting time and muddying the waters. They even mocked his shaved head, asking if his pride had fallen out along with his hair. Unable to hold back, he fought them. Hearing that, Cheon-do curiously asked Nam-gi if he had just shaved. He wasn't completely bald, right? This caused Nam-gi to suddenly defend himself, ranting that the real cause of hair loss was still a medical mystery. He claimed his follicles were still alive and insisted he wasn't fully bald. He said all that with just his eyes. Cheon-do, realizing he had touched a nerve, simply nodded and admitted it was his mistake to bring it up. He then asked Nam-gi when the promotion exam would be held. Nam-gi replied that it was scheduled for the month after next, in 60 days. Hearing this, Cheon-do suggested it was time for special training. Hearing that, Nam-gi grew excited and quickly agreed, saying he would do anything that was asked of him. But instead of intense combat training, Cheon-do told him to take over dish duty from little Nari, who looked exhausted and muttered that the food hadn't been enough. Shocked, Nam-gi shouted in disbelief about having to wash dishes. But Cheon-do pointed at the bag and told him to also clean all the leftover glowstones that were dirty with volcanic ash. Surprised, Nam-gi asked if he really had to wash all of them. When he hesitated, Cheon-do reminded him that if he didn't want to, he could just stay a B-class forever. Cheon-do then turned and told little Nari that she was going with him fishing to aid their digestion. Little Nari happily agreed to go fishing, calling it fun, while Nam-gi stood silently, disappointed and speechless. He just watched Cheon-do, little Nari, and Ku leaving. All the work left to him. Nam-gi then picked up the plates, trying to convince himself that there must be a reason behind these tasks. Deep down, he remembered how everyone always assumed he was a natural-born genius, but in truth, he was not. He clenched his teeth, recalling that he, Nam Ki-seok, had fought his way up to B-class purely through effort and determination. He saw himself as a man who was nothing without his persistence, someone who lived by diligence and perseverance alone. Once he chose to believe in something, he would see it through until the very end. He declared in his heart that he was the kind of man who could fall and still rise again, even if it was the 7th time. With resolve, he ran forward, determined to keep going. He thought to himself that he, Nam Ki-seok, was truly a man who had it all: hard-working, determined, kind, cool, and even charming in his own way. Then at the river, the scene continued with a calm moment by the water. A fishing line dipped into the glowing surface, rippling gently. Nearby, little Nari sighed, noting that no fish were biting. Cheon-do sat beside her, holding his rod. Ku was resting on little Nari's lap. She complained that all the fish seemed to be going to Nam-gi. At the same time, Nam-gi struggled as fish began leaping toward him, pelting him painfully. He shouted in panic, begging for help. He cried out that aquatic creatures were the worst match for his abilities, each hit stinging badly. Seeing that, Cheon-do simply thought to himself how much supervision Nam-gi always needed. Cheon-do then went to Nam-gi and asked him what he thought his mana was for. He reminded Nam-gi to use his mana to form a shield. Embarrassed, Nam-gi admitted that he had practiced during training, but it wasn't going well. Hearing this, Cheon-do reached into the bag of glowstones and pulled one out. He handed it to Nam-gi, instructing him to hold it. Confused, Nam-gi hesitated but obeyed, wondering why Cheon-do had given him a glowstone all of a sudden. But as soon as Nam-gi gripped it, a dark aura surged out of the glowstone, and it fell from Nam-gi's hand onto the ground. Shocked, Nam-gi realized the stone contained demonic energy, which drained his strength and left his arm powerless. Cheon-do explained to him that some glowstones indeed held condensed demonic energy. This revelation startled Nam-gi, but it was clear that this test was part of the training. Cheon-do then gave an explanation about power. He told Nam-gi that the demonic energy from the demon realm was raw and unrefined, something that couldn't be used properly on its own. To control it, one had to use refined mana to push it out first. Cheon-do placed one finger on Nam-gi's chest and told him that he already had plenty of mana inside his body, but he lacked skill in controlling it. Saying that, Cheon-do put his own mana into Nam-gi's body, opening his nerves. The energy within Nam-gi began to flow, lighting up his body from within and opening new channels of power. Nam-gi looked at his glowing hands in shock, realizing something had awakened. Cheon-do calmly explained that a path had now opened inside him, and he should follow it, channeling his mana through it. Focusing deeply, Namgi clenched his fists as energy surged around him. He was then told to direct that power toward the glowstone and try lifting it again. With determination, Namgi pressed his hands onto the stone, pouring his mana into it. His face tightened with strain, sweat dripping as he gave everything he had. Suddenly, with a burst of power, he managed to raise the glowstone high into the air. He shouted with joy that he had finally done it. Namgi suddenly realized something. Washing the dishes and cleaning the glowstones weren't just chores. It was all part of his master's plan to train his mana. Cheon-do, calm as ever, told him that if that was the case, then he should continue channeling his mana and take care of the dishes from now on. With a wide grin, Namgi declared confidently that his master could count on him. Standing proudly by the waterfall, he proclaimed himself as a man who could polish anything until it shined. Truly, a domestic man at heart. Deep inside, Cheon-do encouraged himself quietly that he could do it. At night, the full moon shone brightly over the small wooden cabin. Inside, as the glowstone glow on the ceiling brightening the room slightly, everyone was fast asleep under the blankets, peaceful and quiet. Namgi mumbled softly in his sleep, as he was quite exhausted after doing all the work in day. Beside him, Cheon-do sleeps quietly beside little Nari. Nearby, the Ku lay awake in its drawer bed, hugging that strange cracked egg glowing with fiery orange lines. It muttered regretfully that it shouldn't have taken a nap earlier. Suddenly, its eyes widened in surprise as it noticed something unusual. It saw the little Nari quietly getting up and leaving the cabin. Confused, it tilted its head while watching her sneak outside, wondering where that child could be going so late at night. That's all for today, everyone. Before we wrap up, I want to let you know that we've recently launched a membership program here, where you can enjoy perks like early access to videos and soon, exclusive content just for members. You'll also receive custom badges and emojis to enhance your interactions. If you're interested, consider joining our membership to enjoy these benefits. Check out the link in the description to join. See you all in the next video.